I call Congress to order. I saw a few people making some moves there. Good morning, Congress. Thank you to Rossignol String Quartet who were playing for us earlier this morning. We will now see another short film celebrating union wins this year. You're starting to get the hang of it. I think I said Usdaw leading the way on making noise, so can anyone beat them? No, when the film comes on. NASUWT pulled ahead slightly there, but it seems a bit unfair on smaller unions, so I think you now have to cheer for smaller unions in the future, please. Okay, Congress, I remind you of our statement of conduct, which was circulated to all delegates as part of the registration process and which is now on the screen. Congress, I now call upon Linda McCulloch, Chair of the General Purposes Committee, to report to us on progress of business and other Congress arrangements. Morning, Linda.
Good morning, Congress. Congress, the GPC has agreed the following emergency motions. Emergency Motion 3, Stop the Escalation of War in the Middle East, will be moved by the UCU and seconded by the RMT. Emergency Motion number 4, Make our railways accessible to all, will be moved by the TSSA and seconded by ASLEV. The President will advise when it's hoped to take these emergency motions. I will report further to you in progress of business and other GP decisions when necessary throughout Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Congress, I now invite you to formally receive the GPC report. Is that agreed? Congress, I want to make you aware of a change of the published programme of business. Later this morning, we will be joined by, we can now reveal, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, of the Labour government to give Congress a keynote address. The Prime Minister has agreed to take some questions. As a result, we will now be taking Section 2, Building a Fairer Economy, comprising Composites 8, motions 33 and 34 on Wednesday. Congress, yesterday morning, the President of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Mr. Joe Ajero, was detained at Abuja Airport without charge or warrant by the Nigerian security services. He was just about to board a flight to come here to Congress to join our international delegation. Joe had been intending to talk to us about the persistent harassment and intimidation of him and his NLC colleagues by the Nigerian government. Joe was released last night, but it is clear that his ordeal is not yet over. This unlawful arrest is a gross violation of fundamental trade union freedoms, and in arresting him on his way to speak to us of the essential trade union right to seek solidarity. Nigeria's trade unions still have our solidarity. We condemn the actions of the Nigerian government and demand that they end their persecution of Joe Ajero. Thank you, Congress. I would like to bring Congress's attention to a live dispute that members of Equity are fighting at Welsh National Opera. Last Thursday, they voted by 93% in favour of strike action on a 100% turnout in their first dispute at that company. Every member of the chorus is an Equity member. They are fighting against compulsory redundancies and cuts to their pay and working hours. I would like to ask Congress to send a message of solidarity to Welsh National Opera Equity members. Delegates, we now start with Section 2 of the General Council report from page 18. I now call Motion 24, Protect Arts Workers' Freedom of Expression. The General Council support the motion, to be moved by Equity, seconded by AUE.
Sam Swan, Equity, moving the motion. So this is a motion about freedom of speech, a topic that is usually dominated by some of the most boring, tiresome conservatives who say things like, you can't say anything these days, or complain about that spectre that haunts them, the spectre of cancel culture. Now, we know that right-wingers are completely unserious in their support for freedom of expression. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been the ones to orchestrate the authoritarian anti-protest bill, the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act of 2022, and the ridiculously hefty sentencing for climate activists recently. What they are keen on is freedom of speech that they agree with. In February this year, Arts Council England, a supposedly arm's-length funding body for arts organisations and individuals in England, issued guidance warning against, and I quote, activity that might be considered to be overtly political or activist. They stated that activity considered to be overtly political or activist could lead to reputational risk and see funding taken away. This shocking attack on artists' ability to critique institutions of power caused great concern for our members. And Equity acted immediately to challenge this guidance, asking Arts Council England whether Tory ministers had interfered with a body that is supposed to be independent of government, and whether this was specifically in reference to Israel-Gaza. Arts Council England denied this was guidance directly from government in relation to Israel-Gaza, and so Equity, smelling a rat, submitted a Freedom of Information request, which then revealed that, just as we suspected, at a meeting between Arts Council England and Tory ministers in December 2023, there was a particular agenda item titled Reputational Risk Relating to Israel-Gaza Conflict. So this was an attempt at overt censorship by those valueless, free speech-hating hypocrites in the Tory party. And thank God they're gone. Oh my God. Arts Council England's decision have clearly been subject to pressure from Westminster, and this is deeply troubling for artistic freedom and expression. This, alongside the deplatforming of work by Palestinian artists over the last 11 months, shows that maybe what those conservatives meant was not criticism, but an instruction that unless you toe their reactionary line, you can't say anything these days. With their attacks on civil liberties, trade union activities, and now attempts at explicit censorship, conservatives have proved that if there is any such thing as cancel culture, it is their attempt to cancel the ability of culture to challenge vested interests. After decades of neoliberalism and funding cuts, the Tories wanted more. They not only wanted to slash our public culture budgets to ribbons, they also wanted to define what we were or were not allowed to talk about in the culture sector. What we can say is already severely limited by the fact that there is so little funding. Arts Council England's total budget for the country of England is, according to recent reports, less than the City of Berlin's culture budget. The City of Berlin spends more on culture than Arts Council England. It's just wild. And these cuts have contributed directly to threats of worsening conditions and job losses at, as we heard from Matt Rack just then, the Welsh National Opera. Management is trying to force through a 15% pay cut and compulsory redundancies, but our members have now voted to strike starting on the 21st of September and called on management to come to the table to negotiate. This is unprecedented for the WNO chorus, but shows the severity of the situation for arts workers right now. We demand for arts councils across the nations to ensure that we can have good, unionised, secure and stable work. But we won't wait around for that. It is our movement that protects our arts workers from cuts and censorship. And both will be met with mighty resistance. Trade unions should be leading the conversation of freedom of expression, and we should never let those frauds in the Conservative Party get away with claiming to be champions of free speech. They're phonies. Now, the Labour Party, now in government, must show that they are substantively different. We have to see a commitment to reform the Arts Council to restore its independence and funding. Bless you. Without the freedom to criticise our institutions, we will not be able to create art that is essential for a fair and free society. Congress, please support the motion. Thank you.
Thanks. Colleague AUE to second.
Good morning, Lorraine Monk, Artists Union England. As Equity has already said, in February this year, the Arts Council England issued a threat to both individuals and in arts organisations, warning them about tackling matters of current political debate. Artists might breach the terms of their funding. We were one of the many creative unions that wrote to them asking the Arts Council to immediately retract any threat to artistic expression. They were forced to retract, but only as a result of the outrage and public reaction. And this once again raises the question of who sits on the Arts Council, and do they really reflect the arts organisation of this country, share the values of our democratic and diverse communities? What schools did they go to? What was their experience of reading at home in a warm house? In July this year, we saw the Royal Academy removing 3 images from their Artist Summer exhibition for young artists. They were on the subject of Palestine, the ones they removed. The Royal Academy agreed with complainants that controversial art had to have a context. When does contemporary art, have a context? And ironically, given the number of children that are killed in Gaza, they said an exhibition for young people and artwork by young people is not an appropriate environment for volatile public discourse. Unbelievable. Make no mistake that what the Arts Council and the Royal Academy did was put in writing what artists already know, that certain issues like Israel and Gaza conflict, as it's termed, are not to be raised. And if any Israel artists do raise them, they will not get contracts and they won't get invitations to exhibit from some places. There can be no democracy where censorship like this prevails. Orwell, in his preface to The Animal Farm, observed that unpopular ideas can be silenced and inconvenient acts kept dark without any need for official bans. He said it was the threat of the Catholic Church and Soviet Russia at that time in the 40s. But now there are other forces at work. And I know you know this quote, but I will finish on it. If liberty means anything at all, he wrote, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Thank you.
Thanks both, and just to tell Congress, you're both well within time. Okay, I will now move to the vote on motion 24. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you, that carries. I now call paragraph 2.9 and I call composite 6, funding cuts and impact on jobs for artists and musicians, to be moved by the Musicians Union, seconded by AUE, and I will call equity into the debate as well. Musicians Union.
Congress, hello. I speak to you as a composer and first-time delegate and first-time speaker at conference. Successive Conservative governments have slashed budgets, and the consequences of these cuts are being felt right across the country. The UK's cultural sector has long been the envy of the world. Orchestras, opera houses and ballet companies, art galleries, theatres and community arts projects. We have a rich and varied tradition of artistic excellence, engagement and export. But today, these institutions are struggling. Since 2010, we have seen a 46% cut in real terms toward the funding. Large organisations like the English National Opera, Northern Ballet and Welsh National Opera, and countless smaller organisations and independent producers are now being forced to make cuts to stay afloat. That's if they're even able to stay afloat. Organisations like Safa Ensemble, an organisation celebrating its 30th birthday in 2021, and founded to bring new music to people across England and support the development of composers, was forced to close through the recent National Portfolio Organisation decisions from the Arts Council of England. Happy birthday. Scotland is going through exactly the same process right now, with organisations who want 3 years of stability going on through an onerous process. Congress, I have had sight of a pre-application report into the impact of this process. It is not pleasant reading. Many freelancers reporting projects, regular work, and a whole range of activities scaled back, paused, or cancelled by organisations undertaking this multi-year funding application process. Organisations that are already at capacity, having to divert resources to attempt to ensure their continued existence and support the jobs that they already have. I now run one of these organisations and spent around 100 hours of unpaid time writing this application. The kicker? The Scottish Government hasn't even confirmed the budget for this process. We don't even know when we might know if we are successful. Then, in the last few weeks, Creative Scotland was forced to close their Open Project Fund, which, with just 11 days warning, because the Scottish Government failed to release the already promised money. This fund is the main way for freelance artists to access money for professional development and self-directed projects. This closure, on such a short time, generated 800 applications for an ask of £12 million. This is the equivalent of 6 months of applications in the normal run of things. This has impacted freelancers both financially and their mental health. On Thursday, less than a week after the closure, the Scottish Government released the money, leaving Creative Scotland to work out what to do with this massively increased demand, freelancers to question, was it even worth it? And the sector to work out why they were used as a political football by an arm's-length organisation underfunded for the demand asked of it. If you hadn't guessed, I live in Scotland. I've benefited from the Open Project Fund for individuals, employing around 80 people over the last 10 years through 10 successive projects, with an ask of roughly £100,000. However, I've only paid myself around £25,000 of that to run these projects, lasting between 3 months and a year. So that's about £2,500 a year to manage these projects. So that means I have first-hand experience of how this fund both supports artists and their development, but equally understand the precarity of working in an underfunded sector. This motion isn't Scotland specific, But I use these examples to show a wider problem. Musicians, on average, earn just £20,000 a year, far below the national average. Like many, we are affected by inflation, but as a large proportion of freelancers, inflation affects the cost of us running our business. We must pay everyone else and everything else before we can pay ourselves. This is not a sustainable level of income. Musicians, dancers, actors, lighting designers and set designers, to name but a few, are not just artists. They are highly trained and skilled workers, and they deserve the same respect and protections as any other worker. And yet, for too long, their contribution to our economy has been overlooked. For every £1 turnover generated by the arts, an additional £1.23 is generated in the wider economy. For every full-time role in the arts, a further 1.46 full-time roles are created in the wider economy. And for every £1 of employee compensation, a further £1.24 is supported in the economy. The creative industries are worth £126 billion to the UK economy. What we need is a government that recognises the arts not as an afterthought, but a vital part of our nation's fabric, profile and reputation. That is why we are calling on the General Council to lobby the government to prioritise arts and funding. This is not about charity, it is about smart strategic investment. It is about recognising that a thriving cultural sector is essential to a thriving economy. It is about recognising we need both bread and roses. Thank you.
Thank you. Call the AUE to second, please.
Lorraine Monk, AUE again. I'm the only delegate. We are poor and people have to work, which is one reason why you have me again. Apologies. As the previous speaker said, the creative arts contribute £109 billion to the UK economy 3 years ago. And yet in one of the reports from the same time, we found 15% of visual artists were paid nothing. The median hourly rate was £2.60, and it dropped to £1 for Arts Council funded projects. 70% of the visual art workers are freelance or self-employed. There's been a dramatic reduction in culture spending by local governments, as we've seen as austerity has rampaged through our communities. And the reduction in the funding stream supporting independent artists have gone as well, which is why we're calling for a restoration and increase of public funding of the arts and exploring new avenues for funding artists, including start-up grants for cooperatives. We need more transparent and diverse appointments to the Arts Council, my favourite theme, and one of the things they should be doing is demanding that there should be a minimum wage for anybody that is working on one of the projects that they fund. We need to have recognition that our work is work and that addressing artists' precarious low-paid working conditions is crucial to addressing inequalities in the arts, no longer something for only the wealthy to play at. Education is also key, and we will need money to go into arts education. 40% fewer children took GCSE art in 2023 compared to 2010. We need that at every level, at junior, primary, secondary, further and higher education, and what we used to have, more accessibility for people to do arts across their life. From the cradle to the grave, people could go in, and that gave also artists, creatives, work in terms of teaching. We need hubs in communities where people can access this, and they can actually do things, learn things, make things. We need, crucially, to have a coordinated approach for the creative arts in the UK across all governments, so that it's, education, levelling up, health, planning, housing, communities, they all work together to see how they can improve arts provision. Arts are so important. We need them for our democracy. We need them for our lives. They give hope and inspiration. Please support this composite.
Thank you, Lorraine. I can take equity.
Marla King, Equity, first-time delegate, first-time speaker. Congress, the UK has some of the lowest levels of government spending on the arts in all of Europe. In fact, in 2022, the UK was the third lowest for arts spending out of 27 European OECD countries. And since the pandemic, the UK is one of only 7 countries to have cut arts funding, while France increased it by 25% and Germany by 22%. That is why Equity is calling for the government to raise arts spending from its current level of 0.2% of GDP to the European average of 0.5% of GDP. The benefit of the arts to our lives and communities are indisputable and widely felt. The arts are an essential lever in systemic change and have a deeply powerful role in shaping society and culture. The arts sector also brings clear economic returns. Analysis by Equity showed that for every £1 spent on the arts, over £4 is generated for the local economy. Creativity and imagination are crucial skills in all industries. Bell Hooks said, "What we cannot imagine cannot come into being." In the face of a multitude of social and environmental crises, we need to cultivate our collective imagination now more than ever. We demand transparent and reliable arts funding, with artists and community representation at its heart. Long-term funding models are crucially needed to provide security and stability to artists and the institutions in which they work. Without long-term funding, the arts will cease to be a viable career except only for the wealthiest in our society. The Arts Council's lack of artist representation in decision-making at a senior level reflects just how out of touch they are with art workers. Meanwhile, executive bonuses in the most highly funded institutions continue to rise, just one of many examples perpetuating the exclusivity, inequality, and lack of coordination in the creative arts in the UK. Reform of arts funding goes hand in hand with securing fair pay and good conditions for artists. Most performers still work a 6-day week, when many other workers won a 5-day working week almost a century ago. It's time to end the grueling working conditions and the pervasive low pay and no pay culture in the sector. A reform of arts funding involving an increase in public funding, abolishing low pay and no pay culture, and exploring alternative funding avenues for artists is vital for ensuring a sustainable future for the arts and art workers. We need a government that actually advocates for artists and finally acknowledges artists for what we are, workers. Please support the composite. Thank you.
Like Congress, I will move to the vote on Composite 6. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? That carries. I now call motion 27, Restoring Trust in the Media, to be moved by NUJ, seconded by the Writers Guild. I don't think I'll be able to take other speakers in this debate, I'm afraid.
President, Delegates, Seamus Dooley, National Union of Journalists, proposing motion 27. Frankly, the title of this motion, Restoring Trust in the Media, may seem like the triumph of hope over experience at a TUC conference, but the collapse in truth in the media has profound implications for all of us. Louis Armstrong once said of jazz that if you had to ask what it was, you probably would never understand. Public interest journalism is a bit like that, but you'll recognise it when it's gone. The value of public interest journalism was best illustrated during COVID. Without ethical journalism, without checking, without proper verification, there would have been much more disinformation about COVID-19. And yet, the Reuters report shows an existential crisis in the industry due to lack of trust. Public interest journalism is important because the existential crisis in media leads to an existential crisis in democracy. But this is not some act of nature. The failure of news organisations to invest in quality news has been worsened by tech companies hoovering up to advertising revenues, pivoting away from news on their platforms. This has boosted the dissemination of information. It has led to racism, partisan agendas, unchecked information. all coming from trusted sources like Elon Musk. If that's our future, then I don't want to be part of it. Politicians long lived by the adage, never argue with a man who buys ink by the barrel. The challenge today for politicians is to deliver a two-word response to the likes of Elon Musk, and the second word is off. Because quite frankly, that cannot be the future of our society. We cannot have a situation where information is controlled by those who give primacy of capital over verifiable information. This motion sets out in detail the NUJ News Recovery Plan, which calls in particular for a windfall tax of 6% on tech giants to provide sustainable future to media. We need a diverse media. Today's media is not reflective of society, and it is still far too much of an old boys' club. And the overarching concerns about AI and how AI shapes our future must be something which we as a trade union movement need to address. The rapidly advancing technologies which seek to displace human thought and actions with machines originally had some sort of a sci-fi novelty quality. But as we look now at the quality, at what is coming down the line, and indeed what has arrived in many cases, we have reason to be afraid, and to be very afraid. I commend this motion to you, and I commend the NUJ Recovery Plan. And in doing so, I want to acknowledge the work of our outgoing General Secretary, Michelle Stanistrate, who has decided to step back from her role later this year, because under Michelle's leadership, we have taken a stand. We will continue with our sister unions in the entertainment and media sector to defend public interest journalism. But it's not just about us. It is about all of you. And I urge your support for this motion, and I thank you for your continued support of journalism. I would acknowledge that at times we fall in, we fall out. I'd be very worried if you agreed with all of my members all the time, because I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Call the Writers Guild to second, please.
Hello, Ellie Pearce, Writers Guild of Great Britain. We second this motion. My members are script writers. We write stories, we write fiction, we educate, we entertain, we create fictional worlds that take you to places you haven't even imagined yet. But disinformation spread across social media is a fiction of sort of evil fiction, disguising itself as fact, used to spread hate and to interfere with democracy and elections, to vilify mainstream media and news. If something is said enough times, then it becomes fact until it is proved otherwise. It is not the responsibility of independent news to fact-check social media. It is the responsibility of big tech companies who profit from disinformation on their sites. They must be held to account. Big tech companies want our content. They want it for free to put on their sites and to train their AI software. They have breached creators' copyright on such a large scale to train AI that they can't tell authors whether they've used their work or not. We regulated GDPR, we can regulate AI, so that we are asked permission before any of our data or our work is used for any purpose, including the training of AI. We need to protect creators' copyright, and we need AI regulation. Over the past 14 years, public service broadcasters, like the rest of the public services, have seen their funding cut. The BBC has been particularly targeted, forced to make millions of pounds worth of savings, or cuts as we would call them. These cuts have detrimentally impacted services, including the erosion of local, regional and global news output and scripted drama, including the axing of long-running drama series, Holby City and Doctors. We need to have a properly funded public service broadcaster, plurals. We want more independent news and we want more scripted drama, not less. I ask that you support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now put motion 27 to the vote. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? That carries. Congress, we return to section 4 of the General Council report from page 46, Winning a Better Future for Working People, continued. I now call motion 72, New Deal Next Steps, Sectoral Collective Bargaining, to be moved by CWU, seconded by RMT. I will be taking the NEU in that debate.
Yeah, President, Congress, Dave Ward, CWU, to move motion 72, which sets out the crucial next steps that our movement need to now take to drive forward the New Deal beyond the pending legislation by bringing in sectorial collective bargaining on our terms across all sectors of the economy. Congress, why this proposition, we would argue, is a bit different to some of the debates we've had. We've had some great motions where the movement is uniting. We've got fantastic opportunities with a Labour government. But this isn't about what Labour will or won't do. This isn't about what employers will or won't do. This is about what the trade union movement can do on the back of how we delivered the New Deal for working people. And it is really fundamental to how we now take forward the building of our movement right across the UK. For us, it's about setting out our independent mission from Labour as trade unions, which says we're going to improve living standards for all workers. We've got a mission that is solely focused on shifting the balance of forces irreversibly back towards working class people in the world of work and in wider society. So what are we calling for? A collective bargaining summit within the next 6 months where we can discuss all these issues and come up with a proper strategy that everyone can get behind. We're asking for Paul and the TUC General Council to then publish that strategy in advance of next year's annual Congress. And then we vote on it, we agree it, and we deploy it. We're also saying that Labour bringing in fair pay agreements and introducing sectoral collective bargaining in the care sector is absolutely the right thing to do. But we have got to expand on that. This is absolutely crucial to transforming the world of work in our favour. Why will it benefit us? Well, like the minimum wage was a major policy back in 1997, the New Deal for working people is the real flagship policy that Labour had in its manifesto. And what this will do is how you're going to grow the economy. It's how you're going to make sure that there's a real levelling up agenda across the UK. It's also central to ending the grotesque levels of inequality that the Tories have embedded in our workplaces and in society. And I would argue very, very strongly, is how we bring working class people together to face down the threat of the right, the far right, populism, racism and fascism. We have a job now to unite working class people on the back of everything we've already achieved. And it will help the union grow its power and its membership in the public sector and crucially in the private sector. So look, conference, to finish, summary. We delivered the New Deal for working people. Labour didn't deliver it. It started here 6 or 7 years ago. We brought that motion. We've been banging on about it for years. We're all together in delivering the New Deal. And it's given us confidence as a movement that we can go a lot further. And our ask is this. I think that there are some fantastic leaders in our movement at the moment. I think there's some fantastic reps. We've seen all them wins. We've seen the reps that are coming through. We are building our movement. This is the moment to grab this opportunity to introduce sectorial collective bargaining to work together like never before, to end all the internal union sort of competition and come together in the interests of all workers in the UK. I move.
Thanks, Dave. Call the RMT to second.
Thank you. Good morning, Mick Lynch, RMT. Following Dave, he's said it all. He's my mentor and role model, double act. I just want to say that we've done a lot of work in the TUC on this issue, sectoral collective bargaining, but it's gone into abeyance for good reason. There's a lot of campaigning has been going on. And what the RMT amendment is saying, we need to get back to that detailed work, putting these plans, putting the scopes together, exactly how we're going to go about implementing sectoral collective bargaining. And I'm hoping that we'll stick to the plan that Dave set out, 6 months to have a summit. Then we get into detailed work and how we're going to deliver it. And what we need to do with Labour is present them with our ideas, our concepts, and the detailed structures of how we want to go about collective bargaining on a sectoral basis. And it's in our interest. I've got to say to you, there was a world when Dave and I left school where we had sectoral collective bargaining, and we've heard that people have got poorer and poorer as the bargaining power of trade unions has diminished. So back in the day when I left school, millions of people were covered by sectoral collective bargaining. We're all waiting with bated breath for the engineering agreement to come out, and Ford's Dagenham was always leading the way about what engineering agreements would be right across our manufacturing sectors. The construction sector was governed by collective bargaining, was governed by sectoral agreements. Areas that have now gone completely non-union, like agricultural work. The Agricultural Wages Board used to set pay agreements since the end of the Second World War, I believe. We've had all these structures before, and Thatcherism has destroyed them. The idea of that trade unions can cover virtually every worker. And if you go to Europe, many of these agreements are still in place, and these are highly competitive modern economies in many cases. So for us, it's vital. It's the future for trade unions. It's the key to our recovery, to getting millions of people back under our agreements and millions of people back into our movement as paying members. We want an economy where all workers have the option to join a trade union and all workers are covered by collective agreements, where there is no fear of being exploited, there's no fear of vulnerability. Many of the issues that are covered in the New Deal as individual rights would be covered by sectoral collective bargaining. We wouldn't have the scourge of outsourcing. We wouldn't have the scourge of victimisation. We wouldn't have chancers coming into our industries trying it on, because they would have to abide by the collective agreement set by the trade unions and the major companies. That's the way it used to be. I was a contracting electrician. Every time I moved from one site to another, as the sites ran down, I knew I was going to get the trade union agreement on that new site. That's what we want for the future. We want a mass movement with mass agreements covering millions of workers in this country. Please support and let's get on with the work.
Thanks, Mick. I call the NEU.
Congress, I'm 37 years old, and in my lifetime, the coverage of collective bargaining in the UK has collapsed from 70% to 25%. During the same period, the gap between the average earnings of the pay at the top, bosses, and the average worker has ballooned. The need for collective bargaining to improve the working lives of our members and to address the stark inequality of wealth and power is so stark in our country. Now, Labour's commitment to a New Deal for working people presents a real opportunity to turn that tide. But teachers lost their collective bargaining rights 37 years ago too, under the Thatcher government. Collective bargaining arrangements were ultimately replaced with the School Teachers' Pay Review Body, a model replicated elsewhere across the public sector. Now, a key remit of the Pay Review Body is to ensure that the required number of staff flow in and remain in the profession. Yet on our Pay Review Body's watch, the teacher recruitment and retention crisis has unfolded in plain sight. Now, even at the height of the cost of living crisis, they were only going to recommend 3.5% because of the cost envelope being set by the government in advance. And it was only through our members taking 8 days of strike action that we were offered more in 2023. And let's be clear, it's only because our members were willing to take action again this year that we had a improved offer. These review bodies, they create an illusion of fairness and neutrality, but in fact they are often rigged in advance and deny workers the power to directly negotiate their terms and conditions. We should all stand for their abolition, because it is right that workers have the ability to use their collective strength and to shift the dial on issues. And this is why collective bargaining frameworks are so much better. We should never compromise our members' aspirations, and we should never shackle our own hands. Now, conference on Monday, we debated the need for a long-term pay correction. We will not tackle the crisis in education without a pay correction to 2010 levels for all school staff. But to restore pay, we need to restore collective bargaining. Now, Labour's commitment to establish the school support staff negotiating body holds out hope for a part of the school workforce, and we welcome it. However, teachers need a restoration of collective bargaining structures too. But Congress, the world has moved on during my lifetime. In education, we now face a sector fragmented by dozens of academy trusts that cover more than half of school staff in England's state-funded schools. They are not obliged to abide with national terms and conditions, something a Labour government could legislate to rectify tomorrow at no cost. But it is also right, as resolved in this motion, that we should take time to deliberate amongst ourselves about how we make collective bargaining structures work in our transformed sectoral landscapes. But we must be open to new thinking. And yes, as well as about thinking about how sectoral collective bargaining would encompass those many thousands of NEU teachers working in academies, I'm also thinking about our 60,000 support staff members who belong to the least unionised segment of our workforce. This is something that we want to work with our sister unions on to navigate, because all our boats can rise together if we get this right.
Okay, I will move to the vote on motion 72. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? That carries. Congress, I will now be taking paragraph 4.2, composite 16 and paragraph 5.14 and motion 76 in one debate. I will call paragraph 4.2, the mover and seconder of composite 16, paragraph 5.14, and the mover and seconder of motion 76, followed by AUE, before opening up the debate to other speakers. I now call paragraph 4.2, and I call composite 16, artificial intelligence, regulation, equality, skills, training, and the arts. The General Council supports the composite motion to be moved by Unite, seconded by Accord. Unite.
Please don't short my time. That's the first. Morning conference.
Morning.
How are we? Okay. Moving composite 16, artificial intelligence. So Congress, Susan Matthews, Black Workers Representative on the TUC General Council, and moving the motion on behalf of Unite. Congress, there are a range of issues covered by this motion. The scale of impact of AI on all our industry, on our work, and our society is a huge and far-reaching, and is still only beginning to be understood. Over the past few years, Unite has been doing a lot of work across all our industrial sectors to identify job risks and potential risks for the future. In sectors such as finance, where technology has raced ahead, we have been ensuring the upskilling of all workers to prevent redundancy, redeployment through job displacement. There are really challenges on this, and if the technology is used and in a way that increases social isolation, reduce face-to-face interaction, rather than help to connect people. But friends, what I want to focus on is a major threat of AI that get little or no mention at all. It's about how it's entrenched with systematic discrimination behavior of our society and is being created to replicate and reinforce through AI. New technology are enabling and amplifying racism, sexism, homophobic, ableism, and to be given a hidden form of all kinds of discrimination, which I call it ism-schism. But if it's not new, the form is different, but the outcome is still the same. It's the same old discrimination, the same old oppression. It's becoming clearer and clearer that is happening across different industries and workplace and our society. And the trade union, from our leadership to our workplace reps, we need to be aware and raise awareness. Police in the United States of America are now arresting the wrong black persons, because of AI, having been trained that all black people look the same. Here in the UK, the software being used to make aware of exam marking penalize students from black and Asian and ethnic minority background and those in lower income neighborhood. We are software that are targeted to reinforce prejudice, deliver social division, and promote hate-filled online media context to people. Research is already finding that software models are replicating racism stereotype behavior. Language is the key bit. Language Mobile have found that software carry out linguistic discrimination within those who speak African and American English, being assigned worse job and more likely to be brand stereotypical as being lazy. And we know that technology is being increased use to control workers throughout observation with the low pay outsourced for black, Asian, and ethnic minority workers, being the most at risk with surveillance work in the workplaces. There is something false narrative about the technology. It's above human prejudice and therefore better than technology that is natural. Congress, after years of fighting against discrimination, there is no real threat of being further embedded against women, black and Asian minority, disabled LGBT+, and before properly advised in terms of what discrimination is going to look like. Technology can thus include the opportunity for human advance and for a better life that society on a whole. But it's not the technology is the problem. It's the root of human social economic deprivation, industrial and political problem. And it needs a human social economic industry and political solution. Congress, we have many challenges to our diversity and inclusivity in the moment of many threats that bring with AI. We need to make sure and ensure we need to meet the trade unions in terms of what we need to do in terms of training our rep to ensure that this doesn't discriminate in the workplace. This is not a motion just calling for action. Congress, please support this motion. Now I finish the formal bit. I'll finish off by saying my code. Malcolm X state, education is a passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to no one who does not prepare for today. AI is our future, so let us prepare. Conference, I move.
Thanks, Susan. I call Accord to second, please.
President, Congress, Carol Knowles, President of Accord, seconding Composite 16. Accord organises in the banking industry, and we foresee AI creating major issues in our sector. A report in June 2024 estimated that up to 54% of banking jobs and 48% of insurance roles could be displaced by AI in the future. AI-driven job displacement is predicted to be higher in financial services than in any other sector of the economy. At the same time, it's expected to drive global banking industry profits to $2 trillion by 2028, a 9% increase. This isn't scaremongering, it's really happening. On the 28th of August, the Swedish fintech company Klarna reported plans to halve its workforce of 3,800 people by harnessing AI to replace roles in areas from customer servicing and marketing, thus demonstrating the kind of broad social responsibility that we've come to expect from some in the industry. Its chief exec said that the lower employment because of AI is a matter for governments to worry about. They want to take all of the benefits and none of the consequences. Does this sound familiar? Congress, in 2021, nearly 2.5 million people were employed in the UK's financial and related professional services, accounting for more than 7% of total UK employment. Just think about the scale of potential losses. And considering the scale of branch closures as retail banks seek to reduce their costs to compete with the branchless new competitors, are customers really getting better services? Can they easily access advice and support when they need it at the times of the greatest need, when dealing with, say, fraud on their accounts or the infirmity of the death of a loved one? Faced with the scale of change, Congress were calling for a major programming of reskilling and retraining for employees in this sector. This is to equip them in the new roles that will evolve and help the sector to serve the needs of people in this country, not the interests of shareholders. Congress calls on employers in this sector to work collaboratively with unions, firstly to provide current employees with opportunities to learn new skills or enhance their existing knowledge to meet future requirements, to develop new roles that align with customer needs, explore innovative alternatives to redundancy if some roles are no longer needed, invest in jointly accredited skills champions to enhance reassignment, retraining and upskilling initiatives for future jobs. And finally, to attract more people into the industry from diverse and non-traditional backgrounds. Accord will be taking these issues forward with the employers that we deal with, but we're also asking for the broad support of Congress to reshape the finance industry in the interests of UK customers and society, focusing on social responsibility, not just private profits. I second. Thank you.
Thank you. I now move to paragraph 514, motion 76 from the TUC Young Workers Conference. The General Council support the motion to be moved by GMB, seconded by Community, supported by Artists Union England. So I call on the GMB to move the motion on behalf of the TUC Young Workers Conference.
President, Congress, Charlie Gray, GMB Union, moving motion 76, Young Workers, Artificial Intelligence, AI and Automation on behalf of TUC Young Workers Conference. Congress, our Young Workers Conference commends the work that TUC is doing on AI. This motion sets out how young worker voices can and should be heard, our concerns and fears about AI and a way forward. Congress, AI and automation both present working people with great challenges but also opportunities. We should campaign and bargain to enhance and not replace our members' jobs as new technology is introduced. The numbers in the motion show the level of change that is already underway in the economy, particularly post-pandemic, and the scale of the change that we as young workers expect to see during our working lives. It's not a surprising statement that predicting the future of work is inherently difficult, but some trends can be identified. New technology, including the rapid development of AI, advanced robotics, and new forms of monitoring, these developments can have positive effects for some of our members and for others be deeply damaging. In an ever-changing world of work, we need new rights at work that keep pace with that change and adapt as we move forward. It is entirely rational to expect that the biggest or most damaging issues with AI and automation will either be issues we can't foresee due to that rapid change, or seemingly smaller issues that aren't as small as they seem. That is why our organising and the legislative and regulatory change we demand moving forward has to keep pace. Congress, only a matter of months ago, we heard in the King's speech of the new Labour government reference to regulation of the most powerful AI technologies. This is a welcome move and should hopefully go a long way to properly regulating AI. But it should not make the mistake that if it only regulates the most powerful AI, missing out on giving protection to workers from less sophisticated AI or other forms of automation. We need government to keep in touch with the reality of these new technology and the rapid pace at which they are developing and changing. Government and other regulators need to be able to keep in lockstep, otherwise as working people will be picking up the pieces. As Young Workers Conference, one of the areas of AI and automation that particularly concerned us was the dangers of embedding existing bias and discrimination into codes and algorithms that are supposedly impartial. But these codes and algorithms are written by people who have their own biases and opinions, and AI can't be the opportunity for bosses to wash their hands with the decisions they make. I recently saw a video about an AI program being asked to identify the number of R's in the word strawberry without success. And when the AI program was told it was wrong, it argued back with another incorrect answer. I'm not sure you can argue with a computer program, but I think you get the point. But I highlight this as moving forward, we may not be looking at letters in the spelling of a fruit, but who gets disciplined for not being on their computer and who doesn't, who gets shifts and who doesn't, who's recruited and who isn't, or who is offered promotions and pay increases and who isn't. But this is not simply an area that we should create policy or ask lawmakers to legislate on, or regulators to regulate on. It is an issue to organise on now. We know in the platform economy, where work is allocated through these online platforms and programmes, GMB is organising and winning recognition for platform workers. Industrial campaigns should be our immediate priority, coupled with those new measures to enhance and enforce employment rights in the sector. Our members need to be educated on AI and automation so they're able to identify it and understand the workplace policies that will be needed in order to protect them and their colleagues. Technological progresses can create and improve work, but the risk of displacement is also real. Too often, changes in the workplace are poorly thought through and training is just not available. Monitoring and surveillance culture is also becoming more common across workplaces that we organise in. Our response has to be grounded in our values and of industrial solidarity. Our movement is not hostile to technological progress. We have always used technology to build our members' power, nor do we seek to hold back the tide or put forward an idealised version of the past. You must face the world as we face it and not as we may wish it to be. As young workers, we want a cradle-to-grave education system equipped to provide opportunities for upskilling, retraining, redeployment of young workers whose jobs are impacted by technological changes, and ensure that the UK is leading in lifelong learning and development. Congress, this is an issue that we have to grapple by the horns now. We can't be here in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time talking about a missed moment and missing that opportunity to shape and influence and demand proper and continual changes of this regulation of these technologies. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. I call Community to second, please.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Congress. Morgan Irving from Community Union, first-time speaker. AI brings with it huge opportunities. Opportunities to revolutionise the way in which we work. Opportunities to revolutionise the way in which we develop science, technology and treatment. Opportunities to revolutionise the very way in which our society works. AI is a tool, and as with that, any tool, it's how we wield it that determines the effect it can have. I'm a steelworker, and anybody in a steelworks will tell you that you treat the tools that you use with respect, and crucially, you know how to use them. That's why we need to consider the way in which we use AI, how we use it in a way that ensures young workers like myself, and indeed the entire workforce in the UK and beyond, can seize the opportunity of AI and not be disadvantaged by its challenges. Because we're not ignorant to the challenges that come with the development of AI. And let me be clear, there are challenges, particularly for young workers. We risk seeing the human biases that already exist within our society reinforced by AI. We risk seeing bad bosses using AI not to enhance conditions, but to monitor and remove workers. We risk seeing young workers having the working world around them change without their say or involvement. But that's why this motion is so important. And as I say, AI is a tool, so we need to learn how to use that tool. Learn how to use it to enhance our workplaces and further our interests. Community Union is already doing work with Google to train our members on how they can use AI for their benefit in their workplaces. We need to ensure that young workers have the knowledge, the say, and the ability to use AI to improve their working lives and improve their workplaces. AI does not need to lead to the dystopian future that we see in the media. Hundreds of Arnold Schwarzeneggers marching through our streets are not the inevitability some would have you believe. We can stop bad bosses using this tool against us, but only if we, the workers, take this tool and make it work for us, for me, and for every young worker up and down this country. That's why I'm calling on you to support empowering young people up and down the country to have a say in the way that AI is implemented in their workplaces. Support young workers to receive training and upskilling so that they can develop their careers, making AI work for them. In short, that's why I'm calling on you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Artists Union of England. In the debate, I will take the CWU. I am monitoring the time closely. I don't believe I'll be able to take more than that.
Okay, last one, Council. So speaking on the motion for AI and the arts, Artists Union, we've been raising the issues of AI and creative work for 2 years now at TUC. It's urgent, and in those 2 years, AI has multiplied. We congratulate the work the TUC has begun related to AI and the use of algorithms, which resulted in the draft AI employment bill, and their supporting setting up of union groupings to meet together to discuss AI issues related to their areas. It's fundamental that we must protect and strengthen our democratic systems against the possible threats posed by AI. Our workers' rights depend on democracy. Over the last year, there's been a rise in media information praising the role of AI and listing its benefits without balancing those with the threats. That is concerning. We need legislation to protect artists and creative workers' intellectual property rights. We need legislation to protect workers on the use of AI in the workplace and anywhere where people conduct their work. Approximately 16% of all UK workers are freelance, rising to 49% in the cultural sector, 70% in our sector. Many of those are not working in a recognised workplace at all. We call for ethical usage with consent and appropriate remuneration of original creators for their content and protection on all products, including ensuring creative products are required by law to include information and labelling to be attached and attributed to all products and all creative work that has been made and constructed. There is already confusion. Writers and artists have created stories about the threat of human technology destroying itself for hundreds of years. We know that we can create tools to save lives and create a better world, but we need to control it. We need to control the humans that control it. Frankenstein is a story of one man's hubris, believing he can use scientific technology to save lives. However, spoiler alert, he destroys everyone he meets and his creator. It's still a warning, 206 years after Mary Shelley wrote it. Thank you.
Thank you. Call CWU.
President Congress, Fiona Curtis, CWU, in support of this motion. Artificial intelligence is inevitable. Companies are embracing it and are seeing huge financial benefits. BT has told investors that they expect AI to replace 10,000 roles in BT by the end of this decade. AI could impact nearly every single one of our members if we let it. Postal workers carry digital devices that track their location, collecting data on their productivity and pace of work. Contact centre workers across telecoms and financial services use AI-powered apps to guide customer conversation and meet call handling targets. They're measured on speaking too slowly or too fast, told when to pause, amongst other metrics that determine performance and pay. Openreach, which is part of BT Group, recently tried to introduce an inward-facing dashcam within their vans. This would live record drivers and use AI to nudge both our members and the managers if it detected them looking tired. This is not only obscene, but I also believe it would have been discriminatory. This was abandoned after we launched a campaign that was wholeheartedly backed by our members. Within 5 hours of this campaign launching, our members got an email from Openreach to say that they are not going to roll out dashcams and they have no plans to introduce them. But we have no doubt the business will try again sooner or later. It was the strength of our members that won this, and it will only be with the strength of us pushing this forward we will also win this legislative change. We need legal rights, regulation and enforcement. We need to empower our young workers, and we can no more trust the AI commercial interests to deliver this than we could the tobacco companies on health, the fossil fuel companies on the environment, or water companies on our rivers and seas. We have members who create this technology and confirm that AI being used as a replacement and performance tool is not why it is created. And we should determine when and where AI should be used. And we should be fighting for our members to reap the benefits of AI. Getting businesses to retrain and reskill wherever possible, and ensure that our members are the highly paid experts in their area of work. That's why we applaud the TUC on its AI environmental bill, which would regulate the use of AI and protect the rights and interests of workers. The Labour government must swiftly move to legislate on this issue and adopt the TUC's AI bill in full. Please support.
Thank you, delegates. Okay, I will move to the votes on those two matters. First of all, on Composite 16, will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. That carries. I'll move to the vote on motion 76. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. That carries. I now call paragraph 4.9 and I call motion 62, training and skills. The General Council support the motion to be moved by Usdaw, seconded by Unison, and I will monitor whether I can fit another speaker in. Usdaw, please.
President, delegates, Dave McCrossman from Usdaw, moving motion 62 on training and skills. I'm sure all of you here would agree with me when I say that for the past 14 years, it feels like we've been knocking on a door firmly closed and bolted by the Conservatives. In fact, it's often felt more like a brick wall. The Tories made it clear on numerous occasions they had absolutely no intention of listening to us, no interest in listening to working people, and no interest in listening to the people who know firsthand what our industries need. As trade unionists, we know that working people are at the very heart of a strong economy. So I can say it's an absolute relief to be standing here today talking about training and skills, an issue which is so important for our economic future. Conference, because we now know we have a Labour government, a government that will be listening to us, a government that recognises there is a 14-year-wide skills gap in this country, a gap that has been created by the Conservatives. I still struggle to believe that this is the government that scrapped the Union Learning Fund in England, a fund that had demonstrated time and time again its value, not just in changing the lives of working people, but in delivering increased productivity for businesses. Their incompetence with the apprenticeship levy resulted in apprenticeships falling by a third. £3.5 billion worth of apprenticeship training completely squandered. Congress, the levy has been an abject failure, and it's those failures and failures to improve the training and skills of working people which has left a legacy of poor quality jobs, poor productivity, poor wages, and importantly, poor morale. Congress USDA is clear that improved training and skills is essential for strong economic growth. But there is another very serious issue and reason. The world of work is changing. Everyone at Congress here has experienced or noticed that in their own workplaces. It's a challenge on all of our agendas. The members I represent in retail have seen some of the biggest changes in recent years. The sector is constantly changing in response to the needs and demands of the consumer. But USDA's own research shows that many of our members feel left behind by this onward march of new technology. They haven't had the training that they need to respond to the changes that are happening every single day in their workplaces. They haven't been given the opportunity to develop the skills that they need today. So it's no wonder that they are worried about what the future holds for them. And it's for this reason that I ask you to support this motion. We need better skills and better training for working people. We need to be giving people a chance in life, a chance to access the right skills and qualifications, and a chance to adapt to the changing world of work. Congress, as I said at the very beginning, it's a relief to be up here delivering this motion, knowing that a Labour government is now in charge. There is so much work that needs to be done to clean up the absolute mess left by the Tories. But it's reassuring to know that this government has already expressed its commitment to addressing the skills gap. And that's why we need to be clear with what we want. We're not knocking on that closed door anymore. We finally have the opportunity to achieve the things that we've been asking for all of these years. And that's why I ask you to support USDA's motion on training and on skills. So we make sure that Labour can deliver a new skills framework, which includes major improvements like a right to pay time off for retraining, a complete overhaul of the apprenticeship levy scheme, significant investment in skills and training, and importantly, the reintroduction of the Union Learning Fund in England. Because investment in people will pay off. I know that, you know that, and finally, we have a government that knows that too. Conference, please support.
Thank you. I call Unison to second, and can the CWU and UCU be available to speak? I hope to be able to take you both in debate. Unison.
Thank you, President Congress. Yvonne Green from Unison. Unison welcomes this motion. Learning is trade union business. Nobody as well placed as unions are to reach those who have been failed by traditional education and shut out of opportunities to progress. For millions of people, the workplace is the ideal place to put that right. We're already there, meeting them where they are. Unison has been proud to be a leader in the workplace learning, with a history stretching back to our founder unions, recently with the creation of our Unison College. We can testify, as can other unions, with that ethos and history. The impact of a single episode of workplace learning can be felt far beyond the learners themselves. Their family, their colleagues, their community can all benefit from one person's improved skills and confidence. Multiply that impact across the workplace, an employer, a region, the whole workforce, and the results can be extraordinary. More than that, learning is the business of all of us. The whole that is our national skills gap has become more and more apparent over the last decade. with skills shortages doubling to over 500,000 between 2017 and 2022, and now accounting for over a third of job vacancies. Vital work that isn't getting done because we don't have the people with the skills to do it. Interventions by the previous government only made things worse. The implementation of the apprenticeship levy has been a shambles and a missed opportunity. The abolition of the Union Learning Fund in England was a disaster. Now it's time to put things right. We see the creation of Skills England as an important step in the right direction. But it's only the first step. There is still the proverbial 1,000-mile journey ahead of us. And when previous stages in that journey have been wrong, turns of wild goose chases and ill-advised shortcuts, I think we can all agree that we have a lot of lost ground to make up. So Congress, please support this motion and amendment and help get things moving. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. I call CWU.
Morning, Congress. Kate Hudson, Communication Workers Union, supporting motion 62. Congress, training and skills provision for working people is vital to our economy and to individual career progression. However, several decades of marketisation and underinvestment has left too many workers unable to access the skills and training they vitally need. We fall way behind our international competitors in funding, with the EU average investment in training per employee currently twice that of the UK. As the motion states, we need a new skills framework to address the last 14 years of Tory failure and to meet the needs of workers. The right to pay time off to learn would incentivise workers to upskill and improve the skills base within the UK workforce. And sole learning accounts would allow individuals to plan their own learning pathways. The importance of union learning reps in providing good quality information and support is vital to ensure our members are fully informed about their funding entitlements. However, Congress, the CWU fully support the reinstatement of the ULF fund. However, it has to reflect the needs of 2024 rather than it just being a reboot of 1998. We do not contest the value of workplace learning, nor the value of ULRs, but any return to the ULF fund must be fit for purpose, and it must not have unrealistic and bureaucratic demands on data gathering and access to funding, such as those we've seen when it comes to trade union education. Government intervention in skills policy is vital. The link between education and economic growth is well established. In the last 20 years, spending on adult education has fallen by 30%. Ultimately, we have a skill system that is under-resourced and adults who would like to upskill but cannot afford to do so. All this needs to change, and this motion sets out a pathway to delivering a skills framework that is fit for purpose, both for workers and employers. The CW support.
Thanks very much, Delegate. I call UCU.
President, Congress, I'm David Hunter, Vice President of the University and College Union, speaking to support this motion. UCU represents educators in HE, FE, prisons and adult education. It's an honour here to be before you speaking on their behalf, and I'd like to ask Congress for a show of solidarity for our members at 5 colleges in the north of England who are going on strike today for fair pay. Thank you, Congress. Thank you. I work in further education, And in England alone, our FE members educate 1.6 million people a year. 160,000 of those are on apprenticeship provision. 35% of large employers who train their staff do so through a college, and 30% do so through a university. Our members train and retrain the country's workforce. Our members provide first, second, and third chances. In my own class, I have a colleague who returned to college later in life, who passed the English and Maths qualifications she left school without and secured work in the care industry. Then she came back to college again, retrained in education, and joined my department. She's now not only a highly skilled member of our staff, but a highly valued member of our union, standing strong on our picket line when she struck for better wages. Because despite reskilling and retraining twice over, lack of funding in FE means that she is still a low-paid worker. The last government, obviously, didn't care about that. The last government underfunded our sector and ignored our members. They eroded FE pay by 35%. They drove universities into financial crisis, leaving university staff facing mass redundancies today. They left prison education in the hands of for-profit providers, and they cut adult education to the bone. If our new government is serious about repairing our economy, about reskilling our workforce, and about rewarding workers like my colleague who train and retrain and then remain on low pay, they must make an immediate, significant, and long-term investment in skills. And funding for post-16 education must be at the heart of that. Congress, I commend this motion to you and ask that you support it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Delegate. Congress, you'll have seen that we've been joined on the platform by Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, and we'll be hearing from him. We'll be hearing from him momentarily, but just allow us to take a vote, Prime Minister. So, if I may put the motion 62 to the vote, will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. That carries. It is now my pleasure to introduce Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. Keir, you're very welcome to our Congress. On the 4th of July, Keir led Labour to an historic victory in the election. 14 years of a Conservative government have taken their toll on working people and their communities. Prime Minister, we look forward to working with you to make work pay, to rebuild our public services and our communities, and I'm delighted to invite you to address Congress.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Congress. It's such a pleasure to be back with you again here in Brighton, a city of sanctuary, of solidarity, and a city that once again this summer showed that there's no place for hatred, division, or violence on our streets. A city that I'm delighted to say now has a Labour council once again. And a city that's joined by a string of Labour MPs across Sussex from Worthing to Hastings. And Congress, Brighton holds a special place in my heart because 3 years ago, I gave my first in-person conference speech as Labour leader here in this very hall. I said that our party had to change if we were to win a general election. And Congress, we did. And thank you all for the part that you played in that. And now, because of the hard work that we did together, I'm able to address this Congress for the first time as Prime Minister. the first time, I think I'm right in saying, that a Prime Minister has come here for 15 years, since 2009. 2009, and Paul, that's a year you will remember well. It's the last time Everton got through to a cup final. Although I actually think you lost 2-0 to one of the lesser London teams. So the one promise I can make today is that Prime Ministerial visits were a bit more frequent, perhaps, than Everton Cup finals. Because in all seriousness, I sat on the opposition benches and took many a lecture from the Tories, telling the world what working people do or don't want. And you know that every single one of them was delivered without the common decency of coming here and showing some respect to the people who fight for the living standards of working people every single day. And that era is now over, Congress. And I would like to thank every one of you who played a role in ending it. Every one of you who took to the streets and the doorsteps of your communities to remove the burden of Tory rule from our shoulders. But even more importantly, I'd like to thank every one of you who held the social fabric of this country together through 14 years where it came under relentless attack. The cleaners, the carers, the nurses, physios, shop workers, drivers, builders, cooks, posties, farmers, retailers, warehouse workers, technicians, teachers and teaching assistants, I could go on, the working people who got us through the pandemic and so much more, the backbone of this country. Because Congress, the chance we now have, the opportunity to rebuild Britain, that hope is here because of those efforts. So thank you all for everything you do and have done for our country. But now, the job of rebuilding begins. And I have to level with you. As I did on the streets in Downing Street just over 2 months ago, this will take a while. It will be hard. But just as we had to do the hard graft of change in our party, now we have to roll up our sleeves and change our country. And Congress, the light of a fairer Britain, a more prosperous, secure and dynamic country is at the end of the tunnel. That doesn't mean that it's easy to get there. The Tories knew it would be like this. That's why they called the election early. And we saw, as I'm sure you all did, just how ruthlessly they were prepared to salt the earth of Britain's future, serving themselves to the bitter end. And that's why we were so clear and specific about the first steps in our election campaign. We didn't want to go further because we knew there would be new problems, unknown problems, when we finally saw the books. And with trust in politics so low, I had to be honest with the British public when I was standing in the full sunlight of democracy. I owed it to them to promise only what we knew we could deliver. And yet, Congress, even in our worst fears, we didn't think it would be this bad. The pollution in our rivers, the overcrowding in our prisons, so much of our crumbling public realm, universities, councils, the care system, all even worse than we expected. Millions of pounds wasted disgracefully on a Rwanda scheme that they knew would never work. Politics reduced to an expensive, divisive, noisy performance. A game to be played, not the force that can fundamentally change the lives of those that we represent. And Congress, the bill for that performance is now in. And I'm afraid if we don't take action, it's a cheque that will bounce. Britain left with a social black hole and a financial one. £22 billion this year alone. Concealed not just from us, not just from you and working people, but even from the Office of Budget Responsibility, the watchdog that is there precisely to protect working people. Now, no one in this room wants to hear such a gloomy forecast. I get that. I don't want to be saying it either. It's not how any government would want to begin its work. Yet, given what happened with Liz Truss, given that, unlike 14 years ago, borrowing costs are high and the risk of inflation is real, I owe working people the respect of economic stability, a responsibility not to be reckless with their money. That is the mandate we have won. And we will deliver this by fixing the foundations of our country, taking those first steps towards the long-term change that we need. That is how this government will return wealth creation to Britain, to the service of working people. Because Congress, make no mistake, that is the opportunity here. This is not a project that will be content to achieve a good few Labour things and leave the broader economic settlement untouched. No, the crisis we've inherited means we must go deep into the marrow of our institutions, rewrite the rules of our economy, fix the foundations so we can build a new home. A country where growth not only comes from the enterprise of working people, but where growth serves the interests of working people. Living standards rising, not just because we're redistributing from prosperous parts of the country, but because we're growing the economy in every community. That is our mission. Who is growth for? Who does it serve? The right answer, the Labour answer, the British answer must be working people, and that is the change that we stand for. But there's nothing new in this. It's the purpose of the Labour Party now and always. And throughout this government, no matter the storm, the service of working people will be our anchor, our still point in a turning world, the people we hold in our mind's eye as we face up to the daunting challenge of our inheritance and secure our mission on growth. That's why we've already reformed the remit of the Low Pay Commission to take account of the cost of living and deliver a real living wage. It's why we've launched a new National Wealth Fund to invest in the critical infrastructure our industries need and drive growth into every community. It's why we've unlocked solar and onshore wind, started bringing rail back into public ownership, committed to a proper industrial strategy, switched on great British energy, and begun, in partnership with you and business, the biggest levelling up of workers' rights in a generation. And let's be really clear about why we need this New Deal. It's because this government is committed to driving up living standards, improving productivity, and working in partnership with workers. And Congress, as part of that New Deal, let me again be crystal clear. We will repeal the 2016 Trade Union Act, get rid of minimum service level legislation, end the cheap and vindictive attacks on this movement, and turn the page on politics as united front once and for all. And Congress, this is the opportunity of power. It was hard won and hard fought for. I want to thank the General Secretary for his role in that. Paul has always been a campaigner, a force of nature. And across the movement, there are people without whom we could not have done this. Too many to thank here, but they know who they are. Because election victories don't fall from the sky, certainly not for the Labour Party. But as well as your support, we also had to change. This election would not have been won if we had not changed. We have the chance now to repair our public services because we changed the Labour Party. We have the chance to make work pay because we changed the Labour Party. We have the chance to deliver for working people, young people, vulnerable people, the poorest in our society because we changed the Labour Party. So when I say country first, party second, that isn't a slogan. It's the guiding principle of everything this government will do. We ran as a changed Labour Party, and we will govern as a changed Labour Party. And so I make no apologies for any of the decisions we've had to take to begin the work of change. And no apologies to those still stuck in the 1980s who believe that unions and business can only stand at odds, leaving working people stuck in the middle, who cannot see that this country needs a new path on growth. People who describe policies that give working people more security, more protection, more power and dignity at work, or even the fundamentals of industrial strategy, which is common across the world, as anti-growth. Let me tell you what is anti-growth. An economy where real wages stagnated for 15 years. That's anti-growth. An economy where productivity keeps on flatlining. That's anti-growth. An economy where the state of our public services prevents people going to work because they're ill. That's anti-growth. And so I won't take lectures from the Tories or others who complain every time this government tries to undo the damage that they have done, clinging desperately to the failed model of the past. And nor will I take seriously the complaints of people who had their time, faced with the same difficult problems, chose to run away from the responsibility of fixing them. A party that allowed the politics of easy answers and distraction to become their comfort zone, rather than face the responsibility and reality of government. That has changed. Let me tell you, I see the nurses, the teaching assistants, the carers who can't afford to get their boiler fixed or buy their kids a new school uniform. I see them. I see the public sector demoralised, burnt out in some places, gripped by a recruitment and retention crisis that holds back your ability to do what we all believe in, the service of working people. I see all that. And so I can guarantee this is not and never will be a government that will sit around the table with you and tell you that black is white. But I do have to make clear, from a place of respect, that this government will not risk its mandate for economic stability under any circumstances. And with tough decisions on the horizon, pay will inevitably be shaped by that. I owe you that candour. And I'll tell you why. It's because, as was so painfully exposed by the last government, when you lose control of the economy, it's working people who pay the price. I'll never let that happen under a Labour government. And that's why I call now, as before the election, for the politics of partnership, with us in government, with business, and most importantly of all, with working people. Now that sounds very straightforward and attractive, but I'll tell you this, it's much more difficult. Alongside collaboration, it also requires compromise. It demands that we work through our disagreements and with those who have a different perspective. Partnership is a more difficult way of doing politics. I don't deny that. I know there's a clarity in the old ways, the zero-sum ways, business versus worker, management versus union, public versus private, pick your side, to the victor the spoils. Nonetheless, I say to everyone now, and I think many of you already know this, that kind of politics is not what the British people want. When I say to them that our policies will be pro-business and pro-worker, they don't look at me as if I'm deluded. No, they see that as the most ordinary, sensible thing in the world. I know there will always be disputes. Of course there will. But in all seriousness, there is a mood of change in the business world, a growing understanding of the importance of good work and the shared self-interest that comes from treating the workforce with respect and dignity, the productivity gain of fairness. And Congress, that is an opportunity to be grasped. Business leaders are not knocking on my door saying they want to rip up employee rights. They don't tell me the problems they face will be solved by coming for the trade unions. They want fair taxes, high skills, and the long-term ability to invest. And that chimes precisely with what trade unions up and down the country tell me they also want. Working people want good companies to make profits, attract investment, and create good jobs. And Congress, in a way, that is why the Tory argument on trade unions no longer finds the same audience. The British people are not interested in those tired old tropes. This isn't the 1980s. The mood is for partnership, and not just on pay, on everything, to turn around our NHS, give our children the start in life that they deserve, make our public services fit for the future, unlock the potential of our clean energy. We have to treat this as an opportunity to come together. We're in power now. This is our chance, Congress. Common cause of national renewal. And so as we rewrite those rules of our economy, as we drag this country back to the service of working people, this is a chance that must be taken. Because rules written in the ink of partnership will be more durable and long-lasting, whoever is in power. So it's time to turn the page. Business and unions, the private and public sector, united by a common cause to rebuild our public services and grow our economy in a new way. Higher growth, higher wages, higher productivity, the shared purpose of partnership, the path through the mess the Tories made, and onwards to national renewal. That is the road we are on, Congress, and we won't turn away from it. We will keep to the course of change, reject the snake oil of the easy answer, fix the foundations of our economy, and build a new Britain, more secure, more prosperous, more dynamic, and fairer. Wealth created in every community, a country renewed and returned, calmly but with confidence, to the service of working people. Thank you, Congress. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Congress.
It was great to hear from you as Prime Minister, and you can see from the reaction of Congress that you have the support of the trade union movement in the tasks you've set out. Congress, as I indicated earlier, the Prime Minister has agreed to take questions, and we will be taking questions in batches of 3, and I invite Paul Novak to introduce our first questions.
Thanks, President, and thanks to the Prime Minister, not only for his address, but agreeing to take questions as well. We are going to take 6 questions from the conference floor, and I'll take those questions in batches of 3. So our first question from this side of the room comes from Julia, a social care worker from the Northwest and a member of Unison. Julia.
Thank you. Thank you, President. Thank you, Congress. Thank you, Prime Minister. Welcome to our town.
Thank you.
This is the first question of the day. Unison is usually supportive for labor commitment to national care service and fair pay agreement for care workers. Social care has suffered terribly for the past 14 years under the Tory. And tackling it, the crisis begins with the workforce. We know very well that far-reaching reform cannot happen overnight. But can the Prime Minister reassess Labour long-term commitment to a national care service and getting a fair agreement up and running a bit quicker? Because care worker and support worker, they are suffering up and down the country, including in this room. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Our second question is from David, who's a Unite Executive Council member who works in the health sector. David.
Thank you, Congress. Thank you, Mr. President. Prime Minister, it's great to be here. I'm pleased to see Labour Prime Minister in this hall. Thank you. As our General Secretary, Sharon Graham, said yesterday, I'm sure you heard her great speech. As she said, rates of investment in British industry are the lowest in the G7, and other countries have much more money set aside for future investment. If we don't start investing much more in industry now, how can we ensure Britain gets the good quality jobs we need workers to transition into, and especially our green jobs and the steel works that we all want? Thank you very much, Prime Minister.
Thanks, David. And our third and final question in this section is from Sonia, who's a branch secretary for school support staff at the GMB.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Congress, and welcome, Care.
Thank you.
Labour's commitment to reinstate the school support staff negotiating body is incredibly welcome. We'd like to know, does the government agree it's time to recognise the pivotal role played by school support staff and end the scandal of term time only contracts?
Thank you, colleagues, for those questions. Let me take them in turn. Firstly, Julia, in relation to care and the care service. As I think I've said to this Congress before, I know about this. My sister is a care worker. I know just how difficult it is, how fragile the working conditions are, and it's hugely important that we make that commitment, as we have done and as we do, to a national care service. That is one of the absolute objectives of this government, to create that national care service, and it does of course start with the staff. It doesn't end with the staff, but it starts with the staff, because you will know across your unions, across your members, just how fractured the working conditions are, and that's the reason, amongst others, that so many leave care to go and work in other sectors, because they want a framework that is better for them. So it starts with the staff, and the fair pay agreement, it will be the first of its kind that we will be bringing through, and we've deliberately chosen the care sector because we think it's the sector that most needs it. So that's the foundational stone, if you like, of the National Care Service, but we made a commitment to this. We'll stick to that commitment. We will see this through, and we look forward to working with you, Christina and others, to deliver on this really important commitment. David, on investment, you hit the nail on the head in one of the major failings of the last 14 years, which is we haven't had enough investment to this country, to our economy, to the businesses in which your members work, and this matters hugely. Whenever I ask investors why they haven't put the money into the United Kingdom in recent years, they tell me it's because of the chaos of the last 14 years, particularly the recent years, with chopping and changing prime ministers, chancellors' strategies. That is not to create the conditions for investment. The way to create the conditions for investment is economic stability, real clarity and strategy about where we're going as a government, whether it's on Clean Power 2030 or other strategic decisions, so we can get that investment in, make sure that we get the growth that we need, and growth in every part of the country. And just on growth, because it's so important, yes, we want economic growth. Your members want economic growth. We want wages to go up. We want living conditions to improve. We want to have public services to be better. And we need it across the whole of the country. And that's why I said what I said about redistribution. I don't want a model that says growth is only for some parts of the country and redistribution is the answer for other parts of the country. We've got to have the commitment, the determination to make sure that investment brings growth across all parts of our country. And that's why we set up the National Wealth Fund. That's why the industrial strategy is so important. And Great British Energy to make sure that we get that investment in. So thank you, David, for that question. And then Sonia, on school support staff and the negotiating body. It's really important that we've reinstated the negotiating body, because I want every single child, wherever they come from, whatever their background, to have the best education they can possibly have. And that is down to our teachers and our support staff, who do an incredible job in difficult circumstances. And we owe them not just a negotiating body, but our respect. And it is that, in that spirit, that we will work with them to deliver the first-class education that every child absolutely is entitled to in this country. So thank you, Sonia, for raising that really important issue.
Thanks,
Paul.
Thanks, Prime Minister. Our fourth question, and we're going over to the other side of the hall, is from Helen, who works in defence and is president of Prospect's defence sector. Helen?
Thank you. Prospect's recent survey of women in civilian roles in the Ministry of Defence found that, shockingly, over 60% have experienced or witnessed sexual harassment at work. What will the government do to make the defence industry and workplaces safe for women?
Thanks, Helen. The next question is from Alan, who's the National President of the Educational Institute of Scotland and a Principal Teacher of English. Alan?
Good morning, Prime Minister. The UK is one of the richest countries in the world, but poverty is wrecking the lives of more than a quarter of our children. The two-child benefit cap, punitively introduced by the last government, is a driver of poverty among larger families and is negatively impacting the lives of 1.6 million children. Controversially, your government has not scrapped the two-child benefit cap. What alternative urgent measures are you therefore taking to immediately alleviate the poverty experienced by 4.3 million children across the UK?
Oh, okay. Thanks, Alan. And our sixth and final question is from Jane, who's a retail worker from North Wales and who's also president of USDOR.
Thanks
Jane.
for that, Paul. Morning, Prime Minister. I work in retail, and increasing levels of violence, threats and abuse are a massive concern for me and for my colleagues. Labour's welcome commitment to introduce a specific offence of assaulting a retail worker will send out a clear message that this government takes retail crime seriously. What more will your government do to help us feel safe at work?
Thank you very much, colleagues. Helen, let me start with the question of sexual harassment, because that figure of 60% is shocking, I think, for any of us to hear. And it's not just in defence, it'll be across all other sectors in the public and private. Sexual harassment at work is never, ever acceptable, and we have to take measures to grapple with it. And that's why I'm really pleased that in the New Deal legislation there will be stronger protection in relation to sexual harassment. That's much needed and can't come quick enough, so far as I'm concerned. I think we have to have a wider mission here as well, because whether it's in the workplace or elsewhere, sexual harassment, violence against women and girls is unacceptable in all its forms and all its places. And that's why within the missions that we've set out for government, I've made violence against women and girls central to that, because I'm determined that we, together with you and others, will fight this. It's been talked about for far too long. It's time now for action. I'm really pleased that now we're in power, we can actually act rather than talk about this. So thank you very much for raising that. Alan, thank you for raising the question of child poverty. It is a really important issue, as you know, as the whole of Congress knows, and it matters to this government. Obviously, we've had to take difficult decisions, given the economic circumstances we're in, for reasons that I have explained. But that does not diminish, to answer your question directly, our absolute determination in relation to child poverty. It's far too high. It is our responsibility to bring it down. We've already obviously set up a task force, but that has to get to the underlying causes as well. This isn't an issue that can be solved just by one adjustment in welfare, frankly. It's about housing, it's about education, it's about wages, it's about conditions in which people live, health, mental health. All of that has to be addressed, and we are determined to address it and are already addressing it, because just as the last Labour government brought child poverty right down, so will this government. We'll work with you and others and everybody in the room to make sure that we make good on that commitment, because it is so important to us, and we'll work with you on it. So thank you, Alan, for raising it. And Jane, on the question of offences against retail workers, I mean, this truly is shocking, and I know you've raised it a number of times. Osdor's obviously had a very important campaign on it. Paddy Lillis raises it with me pretty well every time we meet, and rightly so. And I went to Warrington to the Iceland store there to talk to the staff, and it was the first thing that they spoke to me about. I went to Swindon, to the Morrison's shop there, and we had an extended session, and the number one issue for them was the abuse that they were coming under. Sometimes in relation to shoplifting, which is prevalent, as you know, but also more generally. And then in Southampton, which were smaller shops, but still it was the same issue over and over again. It's not acceptable. It can't be acceptable in any circumstances. It is demoralising for the workforce in every single way. And that's why I'm really pleased that we can introduce an offence to deal with it. But we have to go further than that. We can't have a situation where shoplifters can walk in, shoplift and walk back out again, and nobody can do anything about it. We're going to turn that, change that, work with you. This has to be a specific uplifted offence. We have to take it seriously. And I'm not wanting to hear again from those that are on the front line about the appalling attacks and insults that they are subjected to. It's everywhere across the country. It is really hard for the workforce to take. You have rightly championed it as a cause. We join you in that cause, and we'll do something about it, working with you and other trade unions. Such an important issue. Thank you so much, Congress, for having me. Very good to be with you. Enjoy the rest of Congress. Thank you.
On behalf of Congress, I'd like to thank you for attending today, for speaking and for taking questions, and we look forward to working with you and the government.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
There's a big rush of photographers to that side of the room. We happy to go?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, Congress, let's carry on with the business. I call motion 60. Prisons are full, but so is probation. The General Council support the motion to be moved by NAPO and seconded by POA. NAPO.
President, Congress, good morning. Ben Coburn, Acting National Chair of NAPO, a trade union for probation and family court staff, proposing motion 60. Prisons are full, but so is probation. Congress, today around 1,700 people are being released from prison early, having served 40% of their sentence in custody rather than the usual 50%, and in many cases are returning to their communities. This scheme was introduced by the current government solely to attempt to relieve the long-standing crisis of prison overcrowding, itself the product of a generation or more of political failure and neglect. One of the few common...
As you're leaving the hall, could you please show some respect to the Speaker, please? Apologies for that. Carry on.
Thank you. One of the few common factors all these people being released from prison face is that they will be required to work with probation staff as part of the conditions of their release. So far, these workers, due to the way this early release scheme has been announced, have been forced to attempt to do what generally requires months of careful and often incredibly complex work by them and their colleagues into only a few weeks, and in some cases a matter of days. As with so many workers, probation staff continue to suffer from poor pay and excessive workloads, which directly contribute to high vacancy rates and persistent problems of staff retention, especially among some of our most experienced workers. We see thousands of days lost each year to sickness, often in relation to diagnosed mental health issues caused by these intolerable working conditions. Rather than address these issues in a meaningful way, successive governments have prioritised publicity-grabbing announcements on numbers of trainee probation officers they intend to employ. Unfortunately, what they don't tell you is that in many cases, due to the dire working conditions they quickly experience, many of these trainees do not complete this training and others leave the service soon after qualifying. Congress, this motion calls for the government to provide emergency funding to the probation service to address these issues, enabling better pay, improved terms and conditions and safer workplaces for us. To be clear, any such money must not be diverted away from the public sector, and it must be evidenced that every penny has gone directly to improve the working conditions of working people and probation staff, to enable them to have the best opportunity to do what can be an incredibly difficult and demanding job. It is clear to NAPO the current early release scheme, as with those used in the last year by the previous administration, will only provide short-term relief to the problem of prison overcrowding, with the likelihood we will be back in exactly the same position next year. We call on the government to act responsibly and use the time they have bought with this scheme to end the use of inefficient short-term prison sentences where possible. In many cases, these can and should be replaced by properly resourced community-based sentences, with a revitalised, locally focused probation service at the heart of delivery, proven, when properly funded, to be more effective in rehabilitation and reducing reoffending. Finally, we call on Congress to restate the demand for the government to establish a Royal Commission into our broken criminal justice system. Congress, we're told that following the general election, the adults are back in the room without immediate and substantial investment in crucial public services such as probation and prisons, and meaningful progress on sentencing reform. NAPO fear we're set for 5 more years of childishness. I move.
Thank you, Delegate. Congress, I have to say that there's a considerable murmuring starting after the Prime Minister left. I think that's unfair on delegates who have got to move business on behalf of their unions. And I've noticed people leaving the hall on mobile phones. Please show respect to the speakers here at Congress. PO8 a second.
President, Congress, Andy Baxter, POA Assistant Secretary, proud to second the NAPO motion. Our new government have inherited a criminal justice system that is on its knees. Our prisons are chaotic and broken. Probation offender supervisors and prison officer offender supervisors are swamped with excessive caseloads. They're under huge pressure, further exasperated by the hastily introduced end-of-custody supervised licence scheme that was introduced in October 23. Comrades, I joined the prison service in 1989. At that time, the prison population was 39,000. This week, we saw the prison population reach 88,500. The current government median forecasts predict a prison population for England, Wales and Northern Ireland of 105,000 by 2028. We have a probation and a prison service where every sinew is stretched to breaking point. How did we end up in this position? 14 years of Tory austerity, Tory sentencing policy, lack of capital investment in prisons, huge increases in prisoners with complex mental health needs, interference in our prisons from organised crime gangs, prisoner debt, violence. They all contribute to a service that is failing to deliver rehabilitative outcomes. Combine these factors with a staff recruitment and retention crisis, the impact of this on probation staff and prison officers is burnout. The burnout massively increases the risk of people being released without the correct level of supervision. These failings could lead to tragic outcomes and severely put the safety of the public at risk. Please support the motion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I move to the vote on motion 60. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. That is carried. I now call paragraph 4.8 and motion 61. Time to bring an end to unpaid overtime in Cafcass. The General Council support the motion to be moved by NAPO, seconded by Society of Radiographers. NAPO to move, please.
Thank you, President. Congress, pleased in one respect to be here again to highlight the injustices being perpetrated on our workers in Cafcass, but at the same time sad that I'm back here on an issue that we last debated in 2021. The motion follows another members' survey across Cafcass by NAPO activists, and the revelations are quite stark. The survey was run following an announcement by senior Cafcass management in May that there had been a reduction in quantum workloads across the organisation. Maybe they'd been reading one of Harry Potter's books or peering into one of his crystal balls or waving some magic mystic wand to come up with the right answer. But our members in Cafcass don't see that reduction in any meaningful sense. And I'm not going to stand here and accuse senior management of smoke and mirrors, because among senior management are some committed people that want to do things for their staff. But there are some alarming findings in relation to the survey that we conducted. 93% of staff said that they had worked extra hours in the last 4 weeks they had not been able to take back. Of these, 86% said this happened frequently, while 14% said it occurred occasionally. 77% of staff said they did not keep a record of the extra hours that they worked. Of those that did count the extra hours, they had an average of 20 and a half hours working, 2/3 of a working week given away for free. Quite ridiculous. And what are they saying to us, our members? Essentially, I work most nights and most weekends. I'll be even further behind if I tried to take the toil I'm owed. If I counted the hours I work, my hourly rate would actually be below the minimum wage. And I'm told by some managers it's an expectation of the role. Well, I've got news for you. We're coming to find you. And if anyone needs a new deal for workers, it's Cafcass staff who have been put upon by uncaring management at various levels over the years. So, they're discussing revelations. But we want to engage positively with senior management. It's not all grim in terms of our engagement with them generally, but we need them to show some action and some urgency in response to the uncomfortable truths exposed in the survey. So the key thing is that the tally of untaken hours has risen this year to 77% among Cafcass staff and 65% recorded in the last survey. So clearly we need action. We need a rebalancing of priorities within the organisation. We need the leader of the organisation and her senior management team to start engaging more positively. How can we reduce caseloads to manageable proportions? How can we introduce better wellbeing initiatives, for example? But most of all, and this is common to all of the employers that you deal with as well, we need a leadership group within that organisation who's prepared to listen to the experts, our members, and engage positively with their staff. Because if they do not, the crisis will worsen. Congress delighted to move motion 61. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Call the Society of Radiographers to second.
Morning, Congress. Dean Rogers from the Society of Radiographers. There are two common factors coming together in this motion that will be familiar to many of our discussions this week. Firstly, the impact of austerity on some of the most vulnerable and the public servants dedicated to supporting them still casts a long and chilling shadow. The crisis in family courts is rooted in the decision to cut legal aid to family court cases. This costly consequence of uncaring short-termism has been approaching a decade now of cases taking longer, Cafcass members having to explain processes and fill in for missing legal practitioners, and the risks of children's guardians made more complicated and more difficult. In Cafcass, this was made worse by being corralled into the Ministry of Justice, frankly, probably the most dysfunctional of all government families. Underfunded, undervalued and chaotic since Grayling's reign of misery, and a Treasury pay cap that has stopped Cafcass management from being able to compete and match even what local government can find for experienced social work professionals. Secondly, when most of these professionals are women, and it's no coincidence that in the same period as more young people have been going to university, the professions like radiography and social work have seen a growing density of women, the government have reduced relative pay in these professions. Government underfunding of majority women professions has to stop. The lack of flexible working, entrenched in underinvestment in securing the numbers needed to safely meet new demands, feeds pay inequalities within Cafcass and across the public sector. And opting to work part-time as they approach retirement as a means of managing workloads by working on their days off for free is becoming more and more common, not just in social work but across the public sector. Congress, emotional blackmail has to become a redundant currency. But Congress, we have an opportunity for lasting positive change. When I heard that James Timpson had been appointed the Minister for Probation and Family Courts, I, like most with a keen interest in this area, thought, wow, thank the gods the grown-ups are back in charge. Serious problems need serious people and serious partnership working. Like so many parts of the public sector, vulnerable children, their families and Cafcass staff deserve better. Please support the motion.
Thanks, Dean. Okay, I'll move to the vote on motion 61. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. That carries. Congress, thank you for your cooperation this morning, particularly those delegates who've kept it to time strictly. It looks like we are actually moving slightly ahead of business. If that stays this way, I will look to bring forward debates scheduled for the programme of business this afternoon. Discussions are ongoing regarding a composite of motions 17 and 18. Therefore, the next motion to be debated after composite 9, Housing That Works for All, will be motion 19, Climate Change and Workers' Health, to be moved by the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union, seconded by the FBU. So could unions be ready if necessary? I now call composite 9, Housing That Works for All. The General Counsel support the motion to be moved by the Society of Radiographers, seconded by NHB CSA, and various indications to speak, which I'll call shortly.
Morning Congress. President Dave Pilborough, representing the Society of Radiographers. Colleagues, Articles 17 and 25 of the Declaration of Human Rights state that everyone has the right to own property alone as well as in association with others. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his property, and that everyone has a right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of themselves and their family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care and necessary social services. Colleagues, the golden years of council housing are long gone, and with millions of people on social housing waiting lists in England, some people are facing a wait of more than half a century to move into their own social home. This includes many of my organisation's members, and I am sure many of yours. More people than ever are struggling to afford a secure place to live, yet not enough social homes are being built. Social house building in England is at its lowest rate in decades. Insufficient social house building, plus too many homes being sold or demolished, means there has been a net loss of social housing every year since 1981. Between 2022 and 23, there was a net loss of 11,000 social rent homes. The chair of the Parliamentary Levelling Up Housing and Communities Committee said, "The social housing sector is crucial for providing shelter and support for millions of households. Social landlords are, however, buffeted by a range of serious financial pressures. There is a chronic social housing shortage." The committee's report highlights the potential role of private investors in funding the building of more social homes and calls for these investors to be properly regulated to help ensure they are committed to long-term investment in the social housing sector. The report also highlights the failure of the government to provide the social housing sector with the same funding as the private sector for fire safety work, and calls on the government to give social housing landlords the same access to funds for building safety remediation as private landlords. Secure housing was once built into the design of the public sector infrastructure in new hospitals with supported accommodation for new professionals. New schools included caretaker housing. Today's reality is very different. Access to accommodation for millions, including new professionals joining our public services, is difficult to find, expensive, and regulation around renting means it is often unstable and not secured. This is contributing to the recruitment and retention crisis. Amplified by years of below-inflation pay awards, our research shows that take-home pay of real disposable income for a third-year professional renting a typical shared property in Manchester would have fallen by £50 a week between 2022 and last April, leaving them only £123 a week after rent, average transport, utilities and council tax, for a young professional to cover food, clothes, wider transport and study costs, professional fees, let alone some money for rest and recuperation. Derby, where I work as a therapeutic radiographer, is in an unprecedented social housing crisis, with more than 8,000 households on the waiting list for council homes in the city at a time where there is a complete lack of any available, forcing children and parents to live in an unsatisfactory accommodation. The serious situation was laid bare when a senior housing officer told a council meeting that the city was in uncharted territory due to there being the highest demand ever seen for affordable housing. Paired with a decline in the comparable rate of pay over the last 2 decades, many of our members are themselves in a dire situation or having to rely on the bank of mum and dad. The pressures are forcing some children to live in bed and breakfast style accommodation with associated risks to health, well-being and general life chances. Congress, housing is a national emergency affecting our members across all sectors. Please support this motion. I move.
Thank you. NHBCSA to second.
President, Congress, Julia Giorgio, National House Building Council Staff Association, seconding the composite. The housing crisis has been years in the making, from Thatcher to New Labour and back into 14 years of Tory misrule. Our social housing stock has been sold off cheaply, not only to workers, but also to private investors and housing associations. The remaining stock has suffered through a lack of investment and maintenance. Market forces have been allowed to control the level of supply of new homes. Builders, our NHBC's customers, decide how many homes they can build, which through supply and demand allows them to control the selling price in what can best be described as a cartel.
We have a new Labour government with an ambitious target of 1.5 million homes over 5 years, a target that the CEO of NHBC has said will need house building volumes to double for 5 years. Yet last week, Barratt Homes announced they intend to reduce their building volumes next year while announcing increased profits. Builders have not had it all their own way. 13,000 small and medium-sized house builders have been lost over the last 20 years, with the associated loss of jobs. Planning departments have been chronically underfunded, leading to a 2-year delay in some projects from buying the land to getting workers on the ground, and that's if the local Tory NIMBYs don't block it to start with. Those workers that remain in construction are not directly employed. They're self-employed or on uncertain and insecure gig contracts. Builders can control the speed of the build, so work patterns can be similarly controlled by the employer, and that's apart from the vagaries of our delightful weather conditions. These conditions contribute to the fact that 2 construction workers take their own life every single working day in the UK. And we welcome NASUWT's motion yesterday about suicide awareness and prevention. Pressures on construction workers have a direct effect on my members, building inspectors carrying out their job to ensure that homes are built to the right standard, a safe standard, risk verbal and physical abuse by site workers and site managers simply through reporting defects in the works carried out. These assaults are increasing and are a concern for our health and safety reps. Volume house building needs skills, and we have seen that the education system has not delivered those skills through underfunding. It also needs greater investment in public education to fill the skills gap. The planning system needs an overhaul and greater staffing. Government, public authorities and the private sector must work together to deliver on the targets. Those workers should have secure employment with sick pay and paid holidays and all of the benefits which the Fat Cat CEOs of house builders employ. Work together to deliver the houses. Please support the motion.
Thank you. Right, I call CSP next, and can GMB and Unite be ready?
Hi, I'm Lucy Sutton from the CSP, first-time delegate, first-time speaker, proud to support this motion. I came to physiotherapy in my late 20s. What that means is, as a 33-year-old young professional, I can give you many typical experiences of what it's like to be part of Generation Rent. I've moved house 15 times in 16 years. I've only managed to have security now because I live in a relatively affordable part of North Wales. I experienced carbon monoxide poisoning and nearly died as a result of unscrupulous landlords while I was in university studying for my physiotherapy degree. I was paying £10,000 a year for my degree, and I was paying £400 a month to rent a room in a shared house. If I still lived here in Brighton, where I'm from, the cheapest room available on spareroom.com would be £680 per calendar month. That's around a third of my salary as a senior physiotherapist, and that's just for a room. And if I was a lower paid physiotherapy support worker, it would be half my salary. When I contrast my experience with my parents' experience, my mum, a nurse who had hospital accommodation when she trained, and my dad, a firefighter who was able to accommodate his young family in fire service accommodation, the difference could not be more stark. Public sector workers, including physiotherapists, are now forced to live in communities that are disconnected from the people they serve due to rampant rental markets, and this creates a geographic separation of public sector workers that must end. Congress, the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists, supports all aspects of this composite motion. We say now is the time to prioritise tenants. We say no more cold homes, no more overcrowded homes, no more mouldy homes, and no more overheated homes. As physiotherapists, we know the health implications of these properties that all too often public sector workers end up in. And Congress, over half the properties identified as having dangerous cladding post-Grenfell have not had any remediation work done, and we say that must change too. To improve access to public sector professions, including physiotherapy, we need secure, affordable, rented housing and all the measures set out in this composite. The Chartered Society of Physiotherapists and myself are proud to support this composite motion.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Call the GMB.
President, Congress, Taranjit Chana, GMB, supporting this composite motion. Congress, a right to housing is a fundamental human right, touching us all. Yet, decades of deregulation, financialisation and the sale of council house stock has led to a bonanza of landlordism, the collapse of affordable housing and an explosion of homelessness. At its darkest, the passage of the report into the Grenfell Tower fire revealed the savage consequences of placing profits before public welfare. The cladding that was intended to hide the block from the view of the capital's wealthy elite should not blind us from staring this national disaster straight in the face and from seeking to tackle at source the greed, the corruption and the malpractice that resulted in the deaths of so many innocent people. Housing inequality has a devastating impact on Black and racialised communities, exacerbated by post-COVID lockdowns and the escalating cost of living crisis. The outcome of a research carried out by Race on the Agenda in November 2022 found that Black people are 70% more likely to be impacted by a housing emergency than white people. The research found evidence of racism, abuse and poor conditions within the social housing sector, along with a long history of structural racism in housing provision in the UK. The housing crisis daily condemns millions of working people to live in cramped, substandard, insecure, overpriced dwellings that are unfit to be called homes. Congress, this motion seeks to redress the balance of building a better society through the building of proper homes that are affordable, well-regulated and well-constructed by a professionalised sector. This demands government action, planning and the regulation of both landlords and the building trade. It necessitates investment and a desire to see the provisions of affordable housing for all workers. It should not be a utopian for a single person in full-time employment to own their own home. It should be a reality, a right, and the responsibility of a humanistic government that cares about the lives and the well-being of all its citizens. Congress, we urge you to support this composite. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. I'm going to call Unite next, but can CWU, Unison and NAS-UWT be ready to speak? Unite.
Thanks. President, Congress, Tracy Whittle speaking in support of Composite 9 for Unite. Congress, Britain is broken, our infrastructure. Britain is broken and our infrastructure is in a state of decay and disrepair. Nowhere is the failure of this previous Tory government more evident than the failure to provide decent housing for our people. Workers and families left to a whim of profiteering landlords, stuck in inadequate, mouldy and crumbling houses. Unhealthy conditions lead to ill health, blighting of the potential of our children, with sometimes devastating consequences. It is an indictment to the privatised housing market that in the 21st century that Britain have ultimate deaths caused by the failure to provide inadequate housing for all. This is a result of historic failure to invest in council housing. Congress, it is welcome that the new government promises to deliver social and affordable housing as their #1 priority. They must keep to that promise. We cannot have austerity Mark II holding back investment when people are crying out for decent housings to call home. The Labour government needs to get to work, and if that means increasing borrowing to invest in council housing, then so be it. We say, get Britain building and deliver a legacy of new generation of skilled building workers and housing security for all. To do this, we need to think seriously about craft skills. That must mean high quality apprenticeship as a condition of public sector contracts. This must end the skills shortages and menaces of false self-employment. Congress, it's time to get to work. Please support this composite motion.
Thanks, Delegate. I call the CWU.
President, Congress, Scott Hartles, on behalf of the Communication Workers Union, to support Composite 9. Congress, I want to talk about two separate points. The first being the lack of skilled construction workers. When I left school, I was unemployed. I tried so hard to get a job. I sent out 79 letters to joiners in Edinburgh. I got 7 replies telling me to keep trying. Eventually, after around 9 months, something came up. Not a job, but a training programme. This training programme was sold to me by the Housing Association as a route to an apprenticeship. It was to last 6 months, and I was told there was no guarantees, but it was likely at the end I would be offered an apprenticeship. The training was in joinery. At the time I was excited. I had a job in my eyes. It didn't matter that I was only earning £77.50 a week. On my last day, I was taken into the office by the senior manager of the company I was working for to get told if there was an apprenticeship for me. There wasn't an apprenticeship. Now that I'm older, and I'd like to think a bit more wiser, it was so blatantly obvious that I was never going to get offered an apprenticeship. I was cheap labour to take advantage of. The second point I want to talk about is rent controls. I first want to pay tribute to my friend and comrade Mercedes Vialba, MSP. Mercedes, alongside the Renters Union Live and Rent, got, during COVID, a rent freeze put in place for renters in Scotland. This was a massive win for renters and predominantly working class people in Scotland. Once the rent freeze was over, all hell broke loose. Some of the increases were astronomical. The maximum rent could be increased in Scotland is 6%, but that wasn't always followed. I know of a friend whose rent was increased by £800. The friend didn't know increases were capped. They accepted it because they were scared of their family ending up homeless, even though they couldn't afford it. All this person does is work. They do all the overtime under the sun just to get by. They don't see their kids when they take their rest day. They are too tired to do anything. They can't afford to do anything. That is why we need rent controls. Thank you.
Thanks, Talia. I call Unison, please.
President, Congress, Sian Heemskerk from Unison, speaking in support of this composite. The housing crisis has reached a breaking point, leaving countless workers and families struggling to afford a decent home. I am part of Generation Rent. It is highly unlikely that I or many of my peers will ever own our own home, unlike our parents. Unison research shows that increasing numbers of our members spend a lot of time commuting to and from work because they are unable to find affordable housing closer to their workplace. This is a crisis that cannot be ignored. Across the country, more and more workers, especially young workers like myself, are being priced out of the housing market as a living and housing costs rise faster than wages. Last year, a Unison survey found that a third of union members who rent their home were spending 60% or more of their income on rent. This has created a vicious cycle where workers are forced to spend a larger portion of that income on rent, leaving little to no money for other essentials. It is why so many young workers like myself are still living at home with their parents, with the average age of moving out in the UK being 24 to 27 and rising each year. Policies like Right to Buy have decimated housing supply. compounding the housing crisis that has made it even more difficult for workers to find affordable, secure housing. Furthermore, the housing crisis has fueled a recruitment and retention crisis in essential services like health and social care. A recent study by City Hall confirms the alarming link between the housing crisis and staffing shortages in public services. It shows that the housing crisis is particularly severe in London, with vacancies in the NHS being the worse than any other region. Congress, Unison research shows that high housing costs combined with low pay means that 1 in 4 public service workers is struggling financially to pay their housing costs, household bills, and feed their families. But Congress, while workers struggle to find decent and affordable housing, the reality is very different for property owners who are profiting from rising housing costs. This highlights the systematic inequality at the heart of this crisis. Decades of cuts have starved social housing of the resources it needs to ensure significant homes are built for the nation. Congress, the government must deliver on its commitment and go further by introducing the actions outlined in this composite. Furthermore, they must enact strong legislation to clean up the private renter sector, to ensure private renters have a decent, secure, safe and affordable place to call home. Congress, I'm sick of living under my parents' feet. I'm sure they're probably sick of me as well. It is time for me to have true independence and that final step into adulthood. Please support this composite. Thank you.
Thanks, Delegate. I've got to say, there was a bit of murmuring, and it seems to be coming from the balcony up there. Could I ask everyone to show respect for the speakers in Congress, please? I call NASUWT.
President, Congress, Ruth Duncan, NASUWT, the Teachers Union, supporting Composite 9. Shortly after qualifying, my biggest regret was not signing up for the social housing before further education. I could not afford private rent, so I did what I could at the time. Back then, we had the Yellow Pages, which listed housing associations. I wrote to them all and got a mixture of responses, rejections, offers and placements on housing lists. One provider, the London Teachers Housing Association, no longer existing now, placed me on their key workers list. After a short wait, I was offered a flat in a newly converted church for teachers in London. I moved into the property in 1993 with rent and service charges under £300 a month. Today, in 2024, the same rent and service charge is £487 a month, which is a far cry from London's average rent of £2,150 per month for new lets. My rent is controlled, so there is very little incentive to move. But when tenants do move out, my landlord doubles the rent for new tenants. London's housing market has become unaffordable for many, with rents far exceeding the UK average. The new government has committed to building 1.5 million homes in the next 5 years. It must collaborate with industry to ensure that these homes are affordable, well-built and available to all workers. Rent control must also be part of the strategy. The cost of living and high rents are affecting schools' ability to recruit and retain teachers. We need the new government to keep their promise and to prioritise key workers in their housing strategy. Please support the composite. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to thank all the speakers in that debate. If I can move to the vote on Composite 9, will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. That carries. Just to update you, we are still running slightly ahead of business, so after motion 19, I will be taking Composite 3, miscarriage leave. Can I ask that movers, seconders and supporters be ready if we get to that. I now call motion 19, Climate Change and Workers' Health. The General Counsel support the motion. I'll call on Sue Ferns to explain the position on behalf of the General Counsel. Sue.
Thank you, President. Sue Ferns speaking to explain the General Counsel's position on motion 19. The motion recognises the danger that increased exposure to extreme temperatures resulting from climate change poses on workers' health and safety across many sectors, and it calls on Congress to campaign for a national maximum working temperature for heatwave furlough scheme and climate action plans. The motion also calls on Congress to support and take part in heat strike joint days of action between workers, trade unions and climate justice groups. I just need to make the point that decisions to strike, as you know, are taken only by unions and their members. General Counsel does support coordinated awareness raising and campaigning actions to protect workers from extreme heat. Thank you.
Call the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union to move, followed by the FBU seconding.
President, Congress, Sarah Woolley, General Secretary of the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union, moving motion 19. And before I move the motion, Congress, I need to make it clear that if the paper bard from Liverpool and one that is no friend of working class or the trade union movement is in the room, they do not have permission to use anything that I say on this rostrum because the BFAWU does not talk to you. The Morning Star absolutely can, though. Climate change and workers' health is a topic that is crucial for the well-being of workers across the globe. Last year we witnessed the hottest year on record, and it is becoming increasingly clear that the challenges we face due to climate change are not just environmental, they are social, economic and industrial. Workers, trade unions and climate justice activists must unite and work together to enact change, ensuring that it is not the poorest who pay the heaviest price for a crisis they did not create. The climate crisis is undeniably a trade union issue. It is about defending skills, terms and conditions in jobs in a greener world, ensuring a just transition and safeguarding health and safety. The impacts of climate change, from scorching heat waves to devastating floods, are not just natural disasters, they are occupational hazards that threaten the lives and the livelihoods of workers in many sectors. This is why Congress should welcome the fact that the theme for 2024's Workers' Memorial Day was climate change and workers' health. Countries around the world are taking bold steps to protect workers from the devastating impacts of climate change, showing us that it is possible if there is political will. In Spain, for example, the government has implemented a national maximum working temperature, ensuring that workers are not forced to work in dangerous heat. This measure has been instrumental in reducing heat-related illnesses and deaths amongst outdoor workers particularly. In France, the government has introduced a heatwave furlough scheme that allows workers to take paid leave during extreme heat events. This scheme not only protects workers from the immediate dangers of heat, but also recognises the economic impacts of climate change must be addressed through social safety nets. These are not radical ideas. They are necessary responses to the realities of a warming world, and we must demand the same level of protection for workers here in the UK. That is why the motion calls for the establishment of a national maximum working temperature, a heatwave furlough scheme and the development of a comprehensive climate action plan. These measures are not just about protecting workers in the short term, they are about building resilience for the long haul. Congress, this motion also supports the idea of organising a heat strike, a joint day of action between workers, trade unions and climate justice groups, modelled after the fantastic youth climate strikes that captured the world's attention. The heat strike is a powerful tool for raising awareness and demanding action. It can take many forms: direct action, protests, workplace lunchtime walkouts, community actions and much more. It is a way for us to show our collective strength and to insist that our government take the climate crisis seriously. But Congress, we know that it's not just about a single day of action. The climate crisis is an immediate industrial issue for many sectors. Firefighters battling wildfires, health workers coping with heat-related illnesses, forestry workers managing our dwindling forests, water industry workers dealing with floods and droughts, and food workers dealing with excessive temperatures. These workers are on the front lines of the climate crisis and they deserve our full support. That is why this motion also calls for Congress to sign up to take part in the heat strike this summer when temperatures rise above 36 degrees, to circulate information about the heat strike and to support campaigns to establish a heat furlough and maximum workplace temperature. These are not just policies, these are lifelines for workers who are already feeling the heat both literally and figuratively. In conclusion, Congress, the climate crisis is here and it is threatening the health and safety of workers across the globe. But we've got the power to make a difference. By passing this motion, we are sending a clear message. We will not stand by while workers are put at risk by a crisis they did not cause. We will fight for a just transition, for health and safety protections, and a future where no one has to choose between their job and their life. Please support this motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Before the FBU second, can I ask CWU, NEU, UCU and Unite to take the place at the front ready to speak? Second FBU, please.
President, Congress, Jamie Newell, Fire Brigades Union. The FBU is proud to second this motion on climate change and workers' health and add in our support to the heat strike campaign. Now, we first saw heat strike at the TUC health and safety event that was convened earlier this year, and we want to put on record our thanks to Shelley Asquith and the team at the TUC for organising it and for the Bakers Union for hosting it. Climate change is a public health and safety emergency, and we cannot be a country where pensioners die in their homes as a result of the heat, or we see the strain that these rising temperatures place on our hospitals and NHS staff. But for firefighters, climate change is already a regular industrial issue. Now, I raised our climate document last year, first published by the Executive Council in 2010, and this year I'll show you the latest updated version called Scorch, which is available at our store outside these doors. For FBU members, wildfires are not just something that happen in Australia or North America, they happen here. We've had moorland fires in 2018 and 19. In July 22, we had the busiest day in our capital since World War II. And at the same time in Norfolk, we had fire engines being dragged out of museums to assist in resolving incidents because we didn't have enough resources. And we saw firefighters being hospitalised through exhaustion. It's an issue for firefighters in our control rooms, firefighters in our fire safety departments. We're working in poorly designed, not ventilated buildings. It's an issue for firefighters who lack PPE, who lack the legislation to support them when the temperatures rise and the rains fall. It's an issue where firefighters don't have welfare facilities on incident ground, and where they do, brigades are using organisations that do not fit our morals and values. Climate change affects every worker in some way or another. Now, I note the General Counsel's position in relation to this motion, but I'm a student of history, and I know that climate change as a workplace issue has been raised here year on year. So for almost 40 years, actually, Congress has begun to grapple with the complexities of climate change by trade unionists in our universities and government research departments. Now, Congress has talked previously of green strikes, it's talked of green shop stewards and the need for legal rights for those reps to take action to tackle these issues. The need for those rights is greater now more than ever, as we've seen how the state has responded to activists who protest on issues of climate. And we can't wait for employers and we can't wait for governments to take action. They've had decades and done nothing about it. The onus is on us as trade unionists and workers. They need to ramp up workers' action on climate change. It's about taking legal action and action within the law at crucial times. And that's why the Heat Strike campaign is a great example of a start to cross-movement and cross-sector organising. But we need to be ambitious and not just limit our organising. So I want to tell you about an example that Ricardo Latorre was telling me about earlier today, about GNK workers in Florence, where, I'll just quote this now, 400 workers were laid off at a GKN factory. They took over a plant and kick-started a long struggle against decommissioning that took place there. Now, they've occupied that building for 3 years.
Delegate, you've got to move on, please.
They sealed an alliance with Climate Justice Movement, drafting a conversion plan for sustainable public transport. Now, actions like this need our support, and I urge you all to learn more about it and raise their inspirational struggles in your workplaces and branches. Workers mustn't pay the price for climate emergency. We must be brave enough to diversify our workforces and empower workers to tackle governments and employers who fail to take action on the climate. Furlough for pandemics, furlough for heat waves. Invite heat strike to your branches, committees, and support the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Delegate. I call CWU, please.
Thank you, Congress. First-time delegate, first-time speaker. Joshua Barclay, Communication Workers Union, very pleased to support this motion. This is an utterly important motion as the impacts of climate change continue to affect workers all the world over. With temperatures only expected to rise faster, the time for action is now. It's been put off for too long. Workers in my own union, the CWU, are greatly impacted by climate change, like any worker is. But with the majority of our workers working outside, whether that be posties, delivering post, mail workers even working in the mail, overcrowded mail offices, or telecoms workers working in a wide, varied amount of conditions, whether that be in incredible heat, climbing up poles, working in boxes, or underground chambers. All very physically demanding work, and with no upper temperature limit for workplaces in the UK, the legislation, temperatures are putting workers' lives at risk. Our own CWU policy was in support of a maximum working temperature back in 2006. This shows how long and how difficult it has been to try and get this put into the minds of government and as a policy going forward. The issue is not going away. We need to act now. I urge you, Congress, to support this motion. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Call the NEU.
Good afternoon, President, Congress. Emma Brady, the National Education Union, speaking in support of Motion 19. When we think of workplaces with excessively high temperatures, we think of the baking industry and firefighters. However, now with the effect of climate change upon us, more and more workers are affected. Add to this the chronic underfunding of our public sector over the years. This has exaggerated the effect our workers are experiencing, resulting in many workers in the public sector experiencing adverse working conditions throughout the summer. In education, the estate is full of inadequate buildings with flat roofs, large glass windows, limited ventilation, acting as greenhouses. These buildings are exposing our educators and students to temperatures in excess of 40 degrees throughout the summer. To compound this situation, the last 14 years have seen class sizes increase considerably. I'm a teacher of 30 years and I've never taught classes as large as I have today. Often our classes are in excess of 30 within the class. As a science teacher, you can imagine, please Congress, try and consider, in a classroom which is very small, 30 students, limited ventilation. Now consider 30 16-year-olds and the amount of hot air that can produce. And add to that, we may be in a position within the curriculum where we have to get the Bunsen burners out. Now the excitement that contains, as well as the excess heat, makes the room unbearable for teaching staff as well as for our students. A recent NEU survey has found that 85% of teachers state that school buildings overheat in the summer. 33% of those teachers also describe the conditions within their rooms as severe. We need investment. We need to be able to reduce class sizes and have rooms that are fit for purpose. Another study has shown that when buildings reach over 30 degrees, it is very difficult for students to concentrate, and obviously this is impacting learning. Many European countries have a maximum temperature. We also need this protection. But we don't just need it for workers for today. We need it for young people for the future. They have been prepared to take action, student action, that has been able to raise the profile of the climate crisis. We need to put pressure on the government to do the right thing, to plan to address the climate crisis for workers for today, but more importantly, for the students that we teach, the people that we are here to educate, and for workers of the future. Please support this motion.
Thanks very much. Call UCU.
Thank you, Chair. Vicky Blake, UCU, and I'm also Chair of UCU's Climate and Ecological Emergency Committee, and I'm really proud to support this motion, which demonstrates how fundamentally the climate disaster impacts all of our industrial agendas and how we must urgently pursue effective bargaining and campaigning strategies to fight together for our world and all of our abilities to exist and thrive within it. And I thank our NEU colleague for the points that you made about hot classrooms. I'm going to make a similar point about the classrooms and teaching spaces our members work in. I do hope that we get to motion 17 and 18 because I think they will help us to focus on the real and hard programme of work we have to do to fight for that just and radically democratic transition that we need. And thinking about how that translates into practical wins, UCU is committed to green bargaining because our members have made clear that green bargaining and organising is core to our work, and that our movement has a duty to pursue tangible protections from the increasing effects of climate disaster. So we've heard about the serious dangers of working in rising temperatures that are exacerbated by substandard and poorly ventilated workplaces. And I'm going to take a moment to note that poorly ventilated substandard workspaces and overcrowding within them and the effect that has on air quality also speeds up the transmission of illnesses that can exacerbate issues that people might have in being able to regulate their body temperature. COVID has disabled me, it has given me dysautonomia, it means I struggle more with the heat, and that's been quite an interesting experience for me in recent heat waves. So we have an ageing estate and poor planning across UCU members' workplaces, whether that's in FE colleges, prisons, community spaces, and universities. And that makes for intolerable and dangerous working and learning conditions. So we need action, and we need all the actions in this motion, because without a maximum temperature, the reality of the existing codes of practice and regulations is that there is too much subjectivity. And we know that this disadvantages and endangers young and old and disabled people. It is the case that many people have hidden disabilities that affect the ability to regulate temperature, and they will be affected first. But heat is going to come for all of us. If you overheat, it's really dangerous. And anyone here who's done first aid at work training knows the dangers of overheating. So it is an immediate industrial and well-being issue. And I urge all of us to go from this meeting planning to how, to support how we're going to make change, because we need clear campaigning from here. We have to be able to make a difference to all our members' lives, safety and well-being at work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Call Unite.
Hi, Claire Trevor, Unite Hospitality, first-time delegate and speaker. Thank you. Many of us in low-paid, precarious jobs during a cost of living crisis are spending the whole year suffering from the increasingly extreme temperatures in the UK in and outside of work. Kitchen heat is often extreme, with temperatures reaching over 40. On long shifts in poorly ventilated buildings with minimal breaks, this can have serious effects on workers' health. Workers are not just at risk of heat stroke. Being repeatedly exposed to excessive heat can cause health conditions like cardiovascular and chronic kidney disease. There's a proven link between excessive heat and workplace injuries because of the effect it has on concentration. Hospitality workers are at risk from heat in the kitchens and the physically demanding nature of the job. Furthermore, workplaces in our sector, like others, are suffering cuts in a post-pandemic, post-Brexit economic climate. Many workplaces are not getting aircon or heater maintenance, or the emergency fans and heaters needed for extreme temperatures. This has a knock-on effect as there are fewer guests willing to endure extreme temperatures inside hospitality venues, which means there's less money for labour, so the hours available within precarious jobs are also affected. The hospitality sector has a low union density, so there is a limited understanding of workers' rights. Many workers have no knowledge of Section 44 of the Employment Rights Act and how it can be used. Congress, we must change this. Alongside the TUC, Unite is lobbying for a maximum working temperature of 30 degrees or 27 for anyone in strenuous conditions. Workers who don't consider themselves political or who are not aware of unions are still affected by the heat. Youth-dominated, precarious industries are less likely to be unionised. We need to focus on issues which affect young workers, such as the climate crisis, to activate the activists and collectively demand better. This is why the heat strike should be a driving force to mobilise workers to take action, to understand that these issues are a reason to fight back against bad practices in the workplace, and to ensure the crucial renewal of the trade union movement for the next generation. Young workers are not the future. Climate crisis is not the future. Young workers and the climate crisis need to be accommodated now before it is too late. In a just transition, no worker should be left behind, but we must not forget that there are no jobs on a dead planet. There is no trade union renewal if we don't mobilise the future generations of workers. The climate crisis will affect everyone, so it is our responsibility to ensure that we are fighting back against bad practices and reminding workers of their power to do this. Congress, please support this motion and please support the heat strike. Thank you and solidarity.
Thanks very much, Delegate. Okay, Congress, I put motion 19 to the vote. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. That carries. Okay, I'm going to carry on to Composite 3. Delegates, we move to section 1 of the General Council report, protecting the right to strike and winning the New Deal from page 12. And I call paragraph 3.4, and I call Composite 3 miscarriage leave. The General Council supports the motion to be moved by NASUWT, seconded by USDOR and supported by CSP and FDA. I don't think I'll be able to take any other additional speakers in that debate. NASUWT.
Thank you, President, Congress, Patrick Roach, NASUWT, the Teachers Union, moving Composite Motion 3, miscarriage leave. Congress, I'm immensely proud to be moving this motion on behalf of our members, teachers, and all working people. And I want to recognise that this debate may be triggering for colleagues here in this hall today. And I want to say at the outset that my union stands with all those who've experienced the trauma of miscarriage, and to applaud all those affiliates who are taking forward work in this important area and the excellent work that's being done by a raft of other organisations, Miscarriage Association, Maternity Alliance and Tommy's. Around 150,000 women and birthing people every year experience the physical and emotional trauma of miscarriage. Many require treatment in hospital, including surgery. 29% experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. The loss and grief can be devastating. The impacts lifelong. Losing a baby at any stage of pregnancy impacts a person's emotional and physical well-being. But despite the introduction of the Parental Bereavement Act in 2020, which provides the right to 2 weeks statutory bereavement leave for pregnancy loss which occurs after 24 weeks, those who've had the tragic experience of miscarriage before 24 weeks have no such rights and rely on the discretion of their employer, and that's not good enough. Those who are in insecure or temporary employment are often denied any such support from their employer, and many who bear the loss of a child through miscarriage often face further economic disadvantage, up to and including the loss of employment. It's often the case that women who miscarry face multiple discrimination. Black and other minority ethnic women have a 43% increased risk of miscarriage. Eradicating the deeper health inequalities experienced by Black and Asian communities is critical to securing fairness at work, and it requires an anti-racist approach that starts by recognising and validating our experiences. Miscarriage leave is a workplace issue. It's a trade union issue. It's central to our demands for fairness, equality, and decent treatment at work. And we must now step up our demands for change. To secure rights for maternity, paternity, or parental bereavement leave following a miscarriage that occurs before the first 24 weeks of pregnancy. To prevent employers adopting hostile practices that disproportionately leave women vulnerable and at risk of losing their job. You know, the Labour government's plan to make work pay has promised to transform the lives of working women with action to tackle the gender pay gap, strengthen rights to equal pay, stronger protections from maternity and menopause discrimination and sexual harassment, and stronger legislation to protect workers from race discrimination. All of that is welcome. But we want the government to go further by enshrining in law new statutory rights for those who suffer the trauma of miscarriage before 24 weeks of pregnancy, improving parental bereavement leave rights, and requiring employers to make suitable workplace adjustments. This is one area where no one should accept that things will get worse before they get better. One area where the government has the opportunity and, I would say, the duty to act by legislating to champion equal rights at work for all. Congress, please support. I move.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Before Osdor second, we will need to suspend standing orders to allow the other two speakers to speak. Can that be agreed? Thank you. Osdor to second, please.
President, Congress, Jane Jones, Usdaw, seconding Composite 3 on miscarriage leave. I'm proud to be part of this composite that puts the issue of miscarriage and pregnancy loss on this year's agenda. Whilst every experience of baby loss is different, feelings of shock, sadness and grief are common. It's estimated that 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage, but despite this, there is still enormous stigma and shame around baby loss, which can lead to isolation and disconnection, even from partners and close family. So for many, the idea of discussing their loss with managers and colleagues at work is unimaginable. This needs to change. And the motion makes clear the absence of workplace rights for those who lose a baby during pregnancy leaves many thousands of women and their partners where they have one without the support they need to recover physically, emotionally and psychologically. And whilst we know that affiliates have made real progress securing contractual rights for members, for instance, in my union, over a third of our members are covered by agreements that offer paid leave in these circumstances. This gap in statutory rights should be closed. Successive governments over many years have encouraged employers to sign pregnancy loss pledges and create supportive workplace environments, but they've all stopped short of introducing statutory rights. It's been argued that women who miscarry should take sick leave. This is not the answer. And that's clear from the fact that over half of women who miscarry return to work before they are ready. Many women do not qualify for sick pay, and even more fear negative consequences at work for taking periods of sick leave, even dismissal, regardless of what the law says. Congress, pledges and warm words are simply not good enough. We need a day one right to a period of pay and leave for women to take time away from work when this happens, regardless of their type of contract, their job role or their length of service. Please support the motion.
Thank you. Call the CSP.
President Congress, Miriam Akonde, CSP, first-time delegate and speaker. I am proudly with the CSP supporting this motion. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. The sunshine for me as a child turned gray when I witnessed one of the most traumatic experiences of my life, my mother's pregnancy loss. She was in immense pain, soaked in her blood and fluid while crying for help. My father had to break the door. He had been vehemently knocking because I simply froze and could not move. 10 days, even 10 weeks was not sufficient to comprehend this loss. The impact of baby loss, including miscarriage and pregnancy loss before 24 weeks, can be devastating. I am almost sure someone in your life has had lived experience of this loss, as 1 in 4 pregnancies end in a miscarriage. The physical and mental impacts can last for years. Poor workplace support makes this even worse. What I can contribute today is a small hope, a roadmap of how employers can be compelled to do better for their staff. In 2024, trade unions and the NHS Workforce Issues Group signed off NHS England's National Policy Framework for Pregnancy and Baby Loss, which offers up to 10 days paid special leave to staff who have experienced a miscarriage and 5 days to their partners. The framework is clear that this leave should not contribute to sickness triggers, and a GP note is not initially required. Paid time off to attend appointments is also encouraged. The CSP is now asking that all NHS stewards negotiate with your employers to ensure this framework is implemented into local policies. It will support parents who have lost a pregnancy, boosting their confidence to speak up to their managers and colleagues, thereby challenging social taboos around bereavement. A day one right to miscarriage leave should not depend on your employer, your sector of work, your employment status, or your level of earnings. What is good for the NHS is good for all employers and should be rolled out fast and now. We are ready to campaign for statutory rights to miscarriage leave for all who need it. We ask you, Congress, to please support this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Call FDA.
President, Congress, I'm Bea Brown, Vice President of FDA, first-time delegate and speaker. I'm pleased to support Composite 3 on miscarriage leave. It's a critical policy promoting compassion during the most challenging personal moments. 1 in 90 UK pregnancies are ectopic, resulting in 11,000 hospital admissions a year. 19,000 admissions a year relate to molar pregnancy, and risks are greater for minoritized women. But statistics fail to convey the true scale of emotional and physical impact that pregnancy loss carries on women, birthing people, and their families. Where joy is expected, grief follows. Where healing is needed, hurt spreads. And where support should exist, stigma applies. I'm a proud civil servant, usually. The civil service has decent policies on miscarriage leave, but in truth, they're unevenly applied. A colleague shared her recent experience following early pregnancy loss before 24 weeks. She'd conceived through IVF with the additional stress and emotional investment that can imply. On losing her baby, she struggled to look after her toddler, overwhelmed. And just at that moment where she needed her employer to step up and show it's the inclusive employer it promises to be, she was forced to navigate the labyrinth of miscarriage leave policies, requiring repeat painful conversations with different managers lacking training in how to support her, having to review whether her loss qualified under the existing miscarriage leave policy. She should have been met with compassion and clarity, with leave to grieve. This would have allowed her and her family space and dignity. So whilst miscarriage leave policies may exist, in practice they're poor. They distinguish between type and timings of pregnancy loss, as if some losses mean more than others. The NHS recognises grief associated with pregnancy loss can match that losing a partner or loved one. It can take months, if not years, to pass. And yet women and birthing people face obstacles at this most vulnerable moment. In the case of ectopic pregnancy, where a woman's life is often at risk and pregnancies have to be removed via medicine or operation, or similarly in molar pregnancies, miscarriage leave often won't apply. Congress, that cannot stand. We must broaden the scope of these policies to recognise the emotional and physical toll on those coming to terms with their loss. We must remove the stigma of early and less understood forms of pregnancy loss and make sure that support is introduced with compassion, with consistency and transparency, guaranteeing miscarriage leave at every stage of pregnancy loss, no matter the cause. Thank you. Please support.
Well, delegates, thanks for those powerful contributions, and I know that will have been difficult for some in the room. I put Composite 3 to the vote. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. That carries. Congress, I reported earlier on the Congress agenda about action being taken by Nautilus and RMT in the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. Can I urge delegates who wish to show support to join these unions for a photo opportunity in the hall immediately after the close of business this morning? Congress, that concludes this morning's business. Can I remind delegates that there are various fringe meetings taking place this lunchtime. Details can be found from pages 38 of the Congress Guide. For the latest updates, do check the fringe listings of the TUC website. This hall will be closed between now and 1:45. Please make sure you take anything with you that you need before you leave. You will not be able to access the hall before 2 p.m. Please be back promptly for this afternoon's session. Congress is now adjourned until 2:15.